Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Arlington Board of Selectmen. We are meeting on March 5th, 2018, 7:15 p.m. The Selectmen's Chambers, second floor of Arlington Town Hall, 830 Mass Ave, Arlington. My name is Chairman Joe Curo. I'm joined by my colleagues, Vice Chair Kevin Greeley, Diane Mahan, Clarissa Rowe, and Dan Dunn. And we are supported in our work this evening by the Town Manager, Adam Chapdelaine, Town Council, Doug Heim, and Board Administrator, Marie Kropelka. A week and a half ago, I found myself down at Kitty Hawk, down in North Carolina, during the February break. And so, I like to start the meetings with a quote. So tonight's quote is from Wilbur Wright. "Do not let yourself be forced into doing anything before you are ready." So I think that is a call for due deliberation, and that's what we'll be doing this evening. So first up on our agenda is the consent agenda. We generally take one vote on all the items on the consent agenda with limited discussion. Request for special one-day beer and wine license, 317-18 at Whittemore Robbins House for a private event, Diane Gardner. Request special one-day all-alcohol license, 324-18 at Leslie Ellis School, 34 Winter Street for spring fundraiser. Jen Hodgson, Director of Development, Leslie Ellis School, and approval, Elderly and Disabled Tax Relief Fund, Dean Carmen, Town Treasurer. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any of these items?
Move approval.
A motion for approval by Ms. Mahan and second by Ms. Rowe. Mr. Dunn, you have a comment.
I will call attention in particular to the Dean Carmen's presentation in there, because it's got both. We're talking about that later on the agenda, aren't we? Never mind. I take it back. I'll save it for then.
What's that? The elderly and disabled?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot we're on it later on the agenda.
Okay.
All set. Thank you.
Very well. So we have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It is unanimous. We now have appointments. The first appointment is Brian to the Tree Committee. Brian Turnbaugh, term to expire 2/28/2021. Is Mr. Turnbaugh here? If you could please step to the mic and just tell us a few words about yourself and why you want to serve on the Tree Committee.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Thank you. My name is Brian Turnbaugh. Yes, I am interested in being a member of the Arlington Tree Committee. A little bit about me. I'm a resident here. I live on Mount Vernon Street. I have some experience working in an urban environment with trees. I used to live in the District of Columbia. I worked with a volunteer organization there that encouraged people to the community to get involved with maintaining, protecting, and planting street trees and trees on private property. And I think I want to help do what I can here in Arlington to protect and expand the tree canopy here in the town. And I think the Tree Committee is doing a wonderful job, and I would love to be a part of that and help see what I can do to further that mission.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for volunteering your service. Do any of my colleagues have any questions or comments? I want to thank you very much. Could I hear, do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Greeley, seconded by Ms. Rowe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much for volunteering your time and service. Thank you. Next up, we have Surveillance Study Committee, Christina Hildebeidel. This was tabled from the February 26th meeting. Is Ms. Hildebeidel here? Yep. Please step to the mic. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to serve on the Surveillance Study Committee.
Good evening. I'm Christina Hildebeidel. I am a town meeting member from Precinct 1. I live on Sunnyside Ave. And I'm situated in Sunnyside Ave right across from Anatomy Manor, where many of us know, I think it was last year, the residents of Sunnyside Ave had some issues with the manor pointing cameras in our homes. And took to what most, I think, Americans would say, the streets, and tried to dig up some information and reached out to you all. And so I have a bit of a personal interest in this topic, but interestingly have a master's in public policy and have worked in domestic and social policy for nearly 20 years, including in Washington, D.C. For the National League of Women Voters during the time of the passage of the initial Patriot Act. So I have a great deal of experience in civil rights in this particular area of surveillance of Americans.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
Is that it? I mean, I've done 10 years of work since since then, but that's not related.
Like you had me at Sunnyside.
Yeah, right. Diane grew up across the street. Can that?
Oh, there we go. Any of my colleagues have any questions or?
Move approval.
Motion by Ms.
Second.
Mahan, second by Mr. Dunn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
All
you.
opposed? It
Thank
is
you.
unanimous.
Thank you very much.
for volunteering. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to actually flip the order of the next two items. We are first going to vote on the special town meeting for May 2nd, 2018. Ms. Chaplain, do you have anything you want to say to this?
I would only add that the reason that we're asking the board to call this town meeting is primarily to place a warrant article to consider either zoning or extending the moratorium for the recreational marijuana use.
Okay.
Recreational retail sales,
Yes.
excuse me.
Thank you. Do any of my colleagues have any questions, comments, or motions?
Just a quick question about, besides the perfunctory beginning and end warrant article, about how many are in the special?
I would, right now, as I'm sitting here right now, I only see the need for that one article to contemplate recreational sales of marijuana. Between now and the opening of the warrant, if there's some other, maybe a budget adjustment or something like that, I could see that being added, but not many.
Because I thought we were going to add one, is my memory failing me, the selectmen were going to add one regarding putting it to the voters for, I don't want to say package store.
Yeah, may I?
Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I believe that we would also add one with respect to adding, starting the process to add additional alcohol licenses.
Like one or two, but we have to discuss that and see what the majority thinks. I just wanted to make sure my memory was, okay,
Okay.
thank
Why
you.
don't we discuss that when we get to
Yeah.
opening of the warrant, because I have one I'd like to ask the board to consider as well. But, so do we have any further discussion? No? Moved by Ms. Moreau. We have a second?
Second,
Second, okay.
Mr. Dunn.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Dunn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We now have for approval the opening of the warrant for the special town meeting. Ms. Mahan, did you want to bring forward this on the malt?
Yes, and we had discussed this, I want to say within the past 6-7 months, that possibly putting in a warrant article in the special, and the board would discuss what the actual number would be for perhaps the board, if the voters so choose, one or two more licenses for, I call it malt alcohol store, but I don't know what you call.
Liquor store. package
Liquor store, package store.
Okay.
And there was some brief discussion back then, whether it should be one or two, and somebody had said three, but I was thinking at least one or two, with the caveat that it's not that, we're going to give them out right away. The reason I was advocating for two was I could anticipate, one really solid, perhaps, location and business person who was interested, but that we don't keep going back. So if we had two, we could keep one in reserve if something should happen in the future. But I'd just be open to anybody else's thoughts on that.
So, I think generally, since I've been on the board, when a member is asked that an article be included, I think generally as a courtesy, we've done that, and then we discuss it in the hearing process, if that's acceptable to everyone. Concordance. So is that a motion? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm missing Mary Ann Sullivan right now, who is our alcohol license expert. But I also recall from the Board of Selectmen's office discussion, in addition to a package store, there was discussion of expanding the number of all alcohols available for restaurants by a similarly modest number. Right now, I believe there's only one available, but I know that those are a hot sort of commodity. So if it's just something that would enhance the board's discussion, my understanding is that that was also something that the Selectmen's office had been talking about, particularly Mary Ann.
Sounds like two warrant articles, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
maybe two separate ones.
Yep,
And
that's
a lot of this came from talking with Mrs. Sullivan from queries that she had gotten through the office and
Yeah.
so, but.
great. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ms. Mahan. Do you need a formal vote on that, or you good? You good with the board's discussion?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. The one that I would like to ask the board to consider also, I think since we took our vote on the moving to a gender-neutral name for this board, a number of people have approached me, have identified something like 80 instances in the Town Manager Act and bylaws that are not gender-neutral, they're using male pronouns and such. And while Town Council feels that under the scope of the warrant article for changing our name to Select Board, that some of that could be handled, not all of it could be handled. So I'd like to ask for consideration, just that we have a warrant article there. I think it's mostly just administrative, but we need a warrant article to effectuate it.
No, that's
That's
fine.
okay? Everyone's fine with that?
Just
Okay.
make sure when we do our final votes and comments or whatever,
want a
catch
motion to
every
that
key, because somebody's gonna get up and that's gonna be their shining moment of,
Yeah.
you on page 42.
Yeah. I mean,
So we'll all double check that.
It's a global search. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anyone else have anything else to this? So if I could have I don't think we have a motion yet on the floor
No,
to,
and what's the time, I know what's the day and time
To
that we're
open the
opening and
warrant.
closing?
or do we have a motion?
March 13th,
At 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
8 to 4 p. Okay, I'd like to make a motion to open the warrant for the special town meeting, open it on March 13th at 8 a.m. and close it on March 13th, 2018 at 4 p.m.
Second. Second by Mr. Grill. Motion by Ms. Mahan, second by Mr. Grill. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Great, thank you. We now move on to warrant article hearings. The first article for review is Article 17, Bylaw Amendment Demolition of Historic Structures. I know that we have the chief proponent is here. Did you have any prefatory remarks, Mr. Heim, or?
No, I don't want to, I'd like Mr. Carden to be able to make his presentation first. I do have some remarks, so thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Carroll.
fantastic. Mr. Carden?
You all have
We do.
presentation, I have copies of.
Yep.
All right, so I'm Len Carden, member of school committee, but also here more as a town meeting member. Been a town meeting member for eight or 9 years. So as a town meeting member, there are actually very few things that my constituents ask me about, other than leaf blowers and Sanctuary City, that were a lot. The only repeat item that I've gotten is about these tear downs that we see around town. People ask, how are they allowed to do that? Is there anything we can do about it? It's disturbing the neighborhood. So that's something that, not a lot of people, but it's a repeat question that I get from people that know that I'm a town meeting member. So I thought, well, let's think about that. So negative effects of tear downs. They disrupt the character of our neighborhoods. From my perspective, one of the reasons why we chose Arlington was because compared to a lot of the surrounding communities, there are a lot of smaller houses that are more affordable. So it's a more economically diverse community than some of our neighbors. But what we're seeing is builders come in and replace relatively small, affordable houses with large luxury-style homes. There have been about 20 to 25 tear-downs over the last 3 or 4 years each year. That ramped up from more like 7 in 2012. I don't have the numbers for 2017, but I believe it's about the same. As noted in the master plan, high residential real estate values has led to demolition of those houses, smaller houses, and replacement of large houses out of scale with the existing neighborhoods. That was also identified in the master plan as an issue. And then in looking at this, Newton has grappled with this problem much sooner than we did, and they're still grappling with it with limited success. But, they did do a study, and they, felt that the city's heritage there included the 20th century style homes that are also being affected here, the bungalows, the Cape Cods, the colonials, ranches, split levels, and others. And it's important when thinking about historic preservation to consider the value of that type of housing as well. I included a couple of samples of pictures before and after. That yellow house, that bungalow, it was one that was particularly upsetting, I think, to the neighborhood because it was a perfectly good house. Needed maybe a new kitchen and some updated bathrooms, but it was by all accounts a perfectly good house and was replaced with this large luxury house. So I also showed you some streetscapes where there hasn't been a tear down, just as an example of what's being threatened by what's going on. So what I did is I sort of looked around at what are other communities doing to try to address this issue. So the first question is it an issue? And we'll get to that hopefully later. But assuming it is an issue, what can we do to address it? Zoning is very complicated. If you limit lots, if you limit building size, then somebody who wants to just add a bathroom may not be able to do that. There's lots of unintended consequences. So looking around, I noted that just last year, Wellesley adopted a demolition delay bylaw specifically to address this issue. Now, I know that we had a demolition delay bylaw, so I looked into what is Wellesley doing differently than we are doing, and the difference is what's covered. Well, there's a couple differences. The main difference from my perspective is the number of houses that are covered. So in Arlington, we cover a list of properties that the Historical Commission has determined are historically significant. There's about 1,200 properties on that list, they tell me, and they're actually working with a consultant to identify and add about 100 more. But what these other towns do are, rather than having a list, it's also what the Mass Historical Commission recommends, is they have a whole category of properties. So in Wellesley, it's every property built before December 31st, 1949. In Weston, it's 1945. In Newton, Cambridge, and Watertown, it's any property 50 years or more. In Woburn, it's 75 years or more. So, so that's what these other towns are doing. You know, I think you're all familiar with the demo delay bylaw. What it does is, once you apply for a demolition, the Historical Commission has 30 days to hold a hearing. If they find the property is significant, then they can place a moratorium on the demolition for a year. It's a year from the date they first applied. It doesn't stop the demolition, it just postpones it. But I think what these other towns have found is that it does, it can make the difference on the margins for a property such as that yellow one that perhaps could have been flipped by a rehab instead of being flipped by a tear down. It may tip the balance to a rehab and not a tear down. So that's my interest in this. You know, obviously it would have some impacts. The Historical Commission would have an increased workload. They don't currently, there's no, I don't think there's a provision in the bylaw to collect a fee, so they don't collect a fee for this. So they'd have to have an increased budget and the tax impact. So we do get, you know, when these properties are flipped, their value goes up, I checked, by about $300,000 to $350,000. So that's about $3,600 or more per house of additional tax revenue we get. So if you assume that 10 to 15 teardowns could be avoided, which is actually probably very aggressive, I don't think we'd get that many avoided, they'd just be postponed. We're talking about $36,000 to $60,000 a year, possibly in foregone revenue. So as I was looking into this some more, I also discovered that the other way our demolition delay bylaw is different from these other towns is that we also use it somewhat as a historic preservation bylaw in general. So that if you're on the list and you want to replace your windows, if your windows make up more than 25% of the surface area of one of the sides, you have to go before the Historical Commission to do that. So it's not just really a tear down. What these other towns do is, with the demo delay bylaw, is they address tear downs and also near tear downs. So you get, you know, you've seen these builders that'll leave up one wall. In these other towns, they have wording that sort of tries to get at that. I'm not sure of the history of our wording, which it was trying to do, but the way it's currently being used is to address any kind of work done on one of these listed properties, which is not my intent. So I'm not saying for these, you know, my changes would probably cover, you know, 2/3 of the properties in town. I'm not suggesting that everybody who wants to replace their windows has to go before the Historical Commission. So for my proposal this year, it's not going to work. I think you can still modify the bylaw to do what other towns are doing, but it would require more surgery, which I discussed with Mr. Hyam is probably not within the scope of the way the article was written. So my question sort of to you all is, first of all, are you, you know, and I don't know if you have time to discuss it tonight, feel free to contact me directly afterwards. Are you hearing that this is a problem that we need to address? If it is, then I would ask that the planning department, you know, working with me and others who might be interested, take a look at whether this demo delay bylaw is one solution, or maybe there are better solutions that we just haven't explored yet. So that's my pitch.
Okay, yeah, Ms. Rowe.
Thank you for bringing this forward. I'm a firm believer in demolition delay as it is written, and also by what you're trying to do. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think what we should try to do is change the date this year and then try to work on the language so that we do preserve the smaller houses and the bungalows and the, I mean, I live right near Orvis Road, and one of the reasons I go down that road is because it's got so many wonderful examples of Arlington architecture. And it's got two-family houses, it's got bungalows, it's got little tiny houses. I'm not loud enough. That's unlike me. So I think this is a really good step forward, and I commend you for doing it. Thank you.
Ms. Mahan and then Mr. Greeley.
I think this is a good idea to explore, but I think it's kind of from your remarks, isn't ready for prime time right now, because it could, right now, the way it's written, I'm thinking about somebody that does, you know, a major renovation, what you cited about, you know, 25% more of windows.
That already exists, though. That exists now.
Yeah, oh, okay. But, and one of the things that was cited in here, that demolitions, if the footnote that town council provided, would also include renovations. And my thing is, I don't know all the unintended consequences that you all, who deal in this world, in this genre, are aware of. And I wouldn't want to go to town meeting with anything like this until you cited the individuals that you wanted to meet with, planning and town manager, town council, as well as the historic commission. I'll just put it on the table about the 50-year. You know, when I think historic, I think a little bit older, but you all can explore. You know, to me, that seemed a little too, that would have great far-reaching impacts, and sometimes even just for, you know, the private homeowner, you know, a delay of 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks on something that perhaps doesn't need a delay, that's nothing that any of us would want to do. So what I would do is, I mean, wait to hear the rest of my colleagues, is vote no action on this, but refer so that you can start doing that gathering of information with all the fact finders, as well as all the user groups, especially the historic commission. So, but I'm going to wait in case, I would say no action, but I want to wait to see what anyone else has to say.
Mr. Greeley.
So, I also think it's a good idea, although my house is over 100 years old, and certainly many of the sides have more than 25% windows. But what I was going to ask, although what Diane just said maybe changes this, is would we move no action on this, and is it possible to get this ready for the special town meeting? We just talked about opening tonight, but the number of groups he has to meet with, I don't, let me ask town council through you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Do you think that would, or town manager, do you want to comment on that? I mean, we all seem to think it's a good idea, but it needs work, obviously.
Yeah, Mr. Manager.
You okay if I go?
Or either.
Thank you. So I think we're fortunate that we already have a group in town that's working on matters like this, the residential study group that brought forth zoning proposals to last year's town meeting. Group of people sort of involved and engaged in these matters. We could probably invite someone from the Historic Commission to participate in those dialogues. So I think this matter could be quickly referred there. It would strike me as though some of the things that Mr. Cardin described would be hard to get cleaned up in a week's time and then figured out. But I think if the board if the board chose to take no action, I think suggesting or referring it to the residential study group and then asking them to study that over the course of whatever time period was necessary would make sense.
I move no action and refer to the residential study group.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Greeley.
Second.
Can I
by Ms. Mahan.
amend the motion
Sure.
to also include the historical commission?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Dunn.
So there's something that I want to say.
We will.
So this is, we've talked about this, and some of us have had this in writing, but I just want to be really clear about it. So my house, for instance, right now, my house is like 90-odd years old. It is not covered by the demo delay bylaw right now. But if I were to replace the front porch on my house, so like I've got a 3-season porch, right now I could do that with a regular permit, but if we passed the bylaw as like described, I would have to go before the Historic Commission, and that's not the intent of, and that's the reason that we're voting no action.
Exactly,
So I just wanted that,
Need to
because there are a lot of people who don't have all those pieces in place. Doug is raising his hand. Did I say something incorrect?
No, I'd like to,
Okay,
if I may,
all right.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
So, so was it about, okay,
Go
then
ahead,
let me keep going on. I'm not as convinced yet that it is as big of a problem as I can tell from Clarissa's body language and her words that it is. But I'm definitely interested, I want to be convinced, because let me tell you just a couple of the thoughts that I've had about this. So I had asked Adam to pull some, and he shared some of the data that had been working with the residential study group. And so you look at the number of houses that have been done in the like torn down and put up in the last 10 years, the last 5 years, and it was like 60 odd houses, 65 or something like that, which is, no, sorry, it was more than 60 houses, but it was about 90 houses, but it was like, and they were on about 60 streets. So if you think about like the houses as a fraction of the total Arlington housing market, it's not that many. If you think about it in terms of neighborhoods, you could argue that it, like, when you call a street a neighborhood, and we've got like roughly 600 streets, and roughly 65 streets have been affected, so you could say like 10% of our neighborhoods have been affected. But I also think about the stare downs, and some of them are fine. Some of them are, whereas some of them are not fine for the neighborhood. And so I just want us to, so I'm definitely very happy to do to look for more investigation. But I think one of the things that I would like that to come back and understand more about is exactly how many of these houses are the bad ones, and how many of those, what are those the ones that we're going to, and how can we attack this with a little bit more, yes, finesse is an excellent word. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Hine, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, briefly, I just first want to express my appreciation for Mr. Cardin's preparation. He and I talked quite extensively about this. It's a subject near and dear to my heart. In answer to the board's sort of overall inquiry about how quickly something could be done, what Mr. Dunn is saying, in short, is that when we're using the word demolition, the word demolition in the lay person's understanding of it means the house is gone, you have torn it down. But the way demolition is defined under the bylaw right now is both that or taking off more than 25% of the front or side elevation. So it covers both of these things, one of which not everybody agrees is a demolition in the ordinary sense of the word. If we wanted to bifurcate this, and Mr. Cardin and I talked about it, if we wanted to simply bifurcate the bylaw such that we expanded the scope of things that was included in terms of a pure demolition delay, as in like, you may not tear down this house for a year, that could probably be done in a relatively short period of time. The only thing I caution is that Mr. Cardin raised a number of issues. The Historical Commission doesn't charge fees. It's not clear, I think, how this should interact with the Historic District Commission. The Residential Study Group, I do think that there have been some movements with respect to how this would interplay with zoning that are important to consider. So I just want the board to know that you could take the current bylaw as it is and do a relatively efficient change that would just say buildings over a certain age can't be outright demolished, as in taken to the foundation. But that wouldn't address all of the issues that I think we may want to address at some point in time.
Yeah, no, on the one.
Thank you, Mr. Hine. Well, we do have a motion on the floor I know we'll listen to comments. I just wanted to note that Ms. Mahan mentioned the 50, by that standard, I think you've defined most of this board as historical.
1928.
Thanks a lot.
And in need of demolition.
And in need of demolition.
In the process of demolition.
Yeah, I'm very interested, actually. I will be supporting, I want to hear from the rest of the public, and maybe I'll be swayed. But my impulse right now is to support the motion that's on the floor and to get just a little bit more information. I'm also just concerned with unintended consequences, because obviously one of the impacts of a demolition delay is potentially to increase the cost of a project if somebody's carrying those debt costs. And I would want to understand better the experience of other communities that have this. I mean, has this caused costs to rise such that maybe smaller local builders are pushed out of the market, and big folks from out of town who maybe don't have as much of a connection to the community are the ones who are able to ride out that year-long delay? I want to just understand if that's part of the experience, because I would worry that the unintended consequence might be that you end up having something larger or less agreeable on the lot. But I don't think any of us could say with a straight face that we don't hear these concerns from the residents, so. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak to this? Okay, thank you, Mr. Carden. Thank you very much for bringing this, it's very important. Please. Sir, the gentleman in the front, yep, and then Mr. Revelak after him. You can line up. If you could just identify with your name and address and...
Sure, my name is Brian Coughlin. I live at 22 Hutchinson Road with my partner, Olga Musadovova. We just moved to Arlington 6 months ago.
Welcome.
Thank you. And we love it here, and we picked Arlington because of the history.
Yeah.
And we picked the neighborhood we moved into because, I mean, there was a house available, obviously. Sure. But it was a beautiful neighborhood. All the houses are between 1900 and 1935, I'd say. Hutchinson Road, I guess, is in the Morningside neighborhood. I'm still learning all the neighborhood names. And I'm meeting a lot of my neighbors who are here today because there's actually a project that's causing us some distress right on Hutchinson Road at 21 Hutchinson, which is directly across the street from the house we just bought. It's at the moment, there's a house standing there that was built in 1906. It sort of matches the neighborhood in terms of the architecture and the history. It's right next to 64 Old Mystic, which is itself the oldest house in Arlington. It has a long hyphenated name. It's the red farmhouse looking thing on the corner of Old Mystic. And it's on Hutchinson Road, which is itself a historic route, I think it's called. So in December, myself and my neighbors got I think it's called a good neighbor statement or a good neighbor notice pasted on our doors by a development company that had purchased 21 Hutchinson, which is a approximately 2,400 square foot home that's over 100 years old. And they propose to demolish that house. It's potentially going to be happening this week. Subdivide the lot and build a 4,000 square foot house on both of the residual lots that are created. So they're putting up 8,000 square feet of house where 2,400 square feet is presently. And the home that they're tearing down is, I would say, historically significant. I'm not an expert, but it's over 100 years old, and so it's double the amount that this gentleman is proposing for the limit. And I'm not an expert in the bylaws or the operations of the government here in Arlington, but I am, again, distressed by the fact that there isn't any sort of safeguard or waiting period or delay or review or hearing process that was made available to myself in the neighborhood. We got this notice put on our door. This person or this development company, I should say, has applied for, I believe it's called a by right demolition permit, and I believe that permit is issued and about to be pulled. And demolition is about to begin without any opportunity for anyone in the neighborhood to speak up.
We actually we do have already a demolition delay bylaw. So what I would suggest you do first off, and this may be something, the building department should have the address of that house, but I would definitely call the Arlington Historical Commission right away and make sure that it's not on that list of properties.
We actually...
You did that?
Yes, we looked at that.
It's not on it?
The list is posted online, and again, as this gentleman had pointed out, I think it's a list of specific addresses rather than just sort of a sweeping, if a house is 100 years old or whatever. There are a couple of houses on Hutchinson that are on the list,
Right.
but not this one.
You might, they're also updating that list, so you might call the planning department, and Nate Strasberg is working on that,
Okay,
and make sure that it's not in his updated list, too.
okay. Yeah, I mean, that's all. I know it's late in the evening and everyone is tired here, but I did want to just voice that. I'm sure some of my neighbors are going to say similar things, so I'll pipe down at the moment. But it's looking across the street and seeing a 100-year-old home versus two giant new houses that are completely out of harmony with the neighborhood and completely disrupt the character of where we just bought a home to live is a concern. And so while some might be fine, some of these developments, I do think that we deserve an opportunity to comment on that, and rather than leave it to the development companies to come in and do what they'd like, sort of willy-nilly, so.
Thank you very much. If I could just make one comment on Mr. Gurley. I just want to make clear that, and thank you very much for
Certainly.
offering that example. One thing that I think it is important to recognize, though, that if there is already a permit that's pulled for the demolition, no matter what were to happen here tonight or in town meeting, it wouldn't impact that project.
Permit's not officially pulled.
It's not, but still.
It's in the works, it's not officially pulled.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Okay. But even if we were to take a vote tonight, it still has to go to town meeting at the end of April, and then it has to be approved by the Attorney General. And so usually that's not until September that the law is in effect, anything that's passed town meetings. I just want to make sure that just
I
as a
appreciate that.
procedural note, just so that it's understood and there's not any false hope that this potentially impacts that.
No, yeah, understood that, I mean, it's so close to demo, we had figured that,
Yeah.
you know, the operation of new rules takes some time, but I do want to say I appreciate the fact that this is under debate. I do think it's a problem. Driving around Arlington, you see a lot of these beautiful old houses fenced off, and the next week they're gone, and in their place is going to be the next, you know, cookie cutter luxury home, as my friend here says, twice the size of the one that it's replacing.
Mr. Gurley.
Well, first, thanks for choosing Arlington. Welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
We're neighbors. I live right at the bottom of Old Mystic. But I'm curious, is the house you're talking about, did they remove a couple of large trees this week?
5 of them. And my friend Jim can speak to that.
Wait, no,
Could I finish, or?
wait, no.
Okay, well, thank God, but, okay.
But yes, sir, they did. There were 5 large trees behind the house.
Right.
That, from where my house is,
I wasn't loud enough? Sorry, go ahead, yeah.
you'd sort of look out across the street, and behind the house, there would just be a treescape, if that's a word.
Yeah.
But now it's you look across and you see other houses. It makes the neighborhood feel smaller, more built up, less suburban, and more urban. And that neighborhood especially, the way it's zoned, it's supposed to be a large lot, spread out community for families to have a quiet place to live. It's not intended, at least from my read of the zoning map and some of the bylaws, it's not supposed to be as densely settled as it would be if every lot in that neighborhood was purchased, subdivided, and had a 4,000 square foot house built on it.
Right, right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this gentleman? Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Revelak is next. If you'd like to get in line, sir. You can, yeah, thank you.
Good evening, Steve Revelak, 111 Sunnyside Avenue. I came here prepared to speak on 2 issues, but one may be kind of short. The list of cities in the presentation slides in your packet. Over the weekend, I went through and looked up their demolition delay bylaws, and one of my observations was that the bylaws in those towns more or less work the opposite way that ours do, where they have a low threshold for review and then a set of performance criteria for invoking the delay. We basically put what other towns would use as delay criteria and put them as review requirements. And perhaps that's the additional work that Mr. Carden and Mr. Heim referred to needing to be done. The thing that the thing that's caught my attention about this was I understand the motivation is residential, but I'd also like to say that we should be one of the unintended consequences I think we want to avoid is perhaps imposing similar requirements on mixed use and commercial redevelopment. So I live near the bottom of Broadway, which is one of the areas that the master plan and the planning department have identified as sort of a smart growth, mixed use, candidate area. There was one commercial redevelopment done in the last year, and we have 2 more permitted in the works. I'm very excited about this and looking forward to them. But in terms of commercial properties on the lower end of Broadway, just starting at the, sort of at the Somerville side of the street, Cityside Subaru, built in 1900. The Leahy Building, built in 1920. Boyles Market, built in 1930. The food pantry, which is now owned by Housing Corporation of Arlington and subject, and, you know, will be the site of a mixed-use development, 1952. Arlington Automatic Transmission, the white concrete block building that's been abandoned for a decade, that was 1964. And finally, the Dunkin' Donuts on the corner of North Union Avenue and Broadway was built in 1966. So nothing against the Dunk personally, but I don't think it needs a historic, you know, the demolition of that building should not require a historical society review. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Yes, sir.
My name is James Kelly. I live at 31 Hutchinson Road, and I've lived there since November 20, 1992. The reason I can remember the date is we brought my daughter home to that house. I distributed those pictures because those trees directly abut my property. I pull in my driveway. I've been pulling in there for over 25 years underneath those trees. Those trees are in direct violation of the setback rule for development. The town of Arlington has a $500 fine to remove those trees. I would invite you all to drive up the street and take a look at the desecration they have created to our neighborhood. It's sickening. I want to sell my house and leave. That's how upset I am. The thing that made me, many of you don't know, I own Cambridge Landscape Company, okay? I've done work in this town on the trees. I've done work in storms all across the state, up into New Hampshire. I've remediated construction problems for trees. I've written construction programs to save trees. And I'm going to tell you right now that your tree ordinance is woefully inadequate. To have a contractor tell your tree warden, I'm taking them down and I'll pay the fine, is a crime. Okay? It's a crime. This project should be stopped. Hutchinson Road was the first designated scenic road in Middlesex County. Okay, it's a significant road. If you read Chelmsford, I believe Groton, they talk about you can't have a curb cut without going to the planning board on a scenic road. Not happening in Hutchinson. This project's going to call for a second curb cut. That's a planning board issue under scenic road. I've been all through the websites. Everything I read, Arlington just takes this simple approach to things, a couple of paragraphs. If you look at the town of Concord, those trees would cost $375 per caliper inch, okay? My guess is, just by looking at the trees, it's over 120 caliper inches that have been removed there. That's $45,000, not $2,500. Put that in your tree fund and you could do some real things. Okay?
If I could just interject, it's interesting you say that, because we just actually voted at the last meeting to recommend to town meeting an update to the tree protection bylaw to bring that up to the level that we charge for street tree removal, so.
Right, but you're only talking $50 to $100 per caliper inch. You're way behind. You can't go pick up a tree at a nursery, a 2.5-inch tree even, and put it in for $250, okay? My company does all kinds of landscape construction. We're a $15 million company, all right? We're the largest tree and landscape company in this area. I know what goes on. It's like you are like so far behind the times with the fines, with charging, all right? Your tree warden, who's a very, very nice guy, I think he believes he can't stop a project. He walked in that yard and they told him that we'd take him down, we'll pay the fine. That's ridiculous. He should just like, no, you stopped. But what it says in your bylaw is he has to approve it within 10 days. It really doesn't say he can disapprove it. And that's a problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Ma'am.
I'm here because of what's going on at 21 Hutchinson Road. My name is Jane Kellenfellow Blagden. I've been a resident of Arlington for over 70 years. My husband and I have had our home on Hutchinson Road for 47 years. I went to Hardy School, Junior High East, and graduated from high school, and our 3 sons graduated from Arlington High. I'm very upset about to see what's happening with Arlington, with all these huge houses being pushed into little spaces and not in the character of the adjoining houses is terrible. I mean, if the houses down by the school there, the Bishop School, these huge things across, oh, it just ruins the whole character of it. And our road is supposed to be a scenic road. Hutchinson Road is the only one in Arlington, and it's being ruined. This is what they're doing at 21 Hutchinson Road, taking down all the trees, and they want to put two big, huge houses there close to the street, right almost on top of the oldest house in Arlington. So I think that they've got to have the neighbors involved before they do all this stuff. They should have a say on what's going on around them. And I just think something should be done as soon as possible. And I was thinking even maybe if they had a moratorium of some time, for some time, just to stop back and look at what's going on here. It's terrible. Once it's gone, it's gone. That's all. It's terrible. So I'd just like to see, maybe you can do something. It's nice seeing all of you. I've seen you on the TV. I've seen you two a lot.
Too much.
A number of years, too.
Did you notice that it really doesn't add 20 pounds to me on TV, now that you see me in real life? It doesn't add pounds to us?
No, you look good.
Thank you for being here.
Very nice that when you see it in person. I'm really impressed.
Good, thank you very much for your
Thank you for
testimony.
coming in.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Patrice Ambrosia. I live at 35 Hutchinson Road, and my house is one of the houses on the list on Hutchinson Road. I just wanted to express I bought our house because of the way the house looked, the neighborhood, and I came from Somerville, from, I would say, densification. And I moved to this house was the house for us because it felt like I was in the suburbs, but I was in the city. And that's one of the great things about Arlington is you get more green space and you don't have to be 15 miles out of the city. And it's just really disappointing that a house like 21 Hutchinson is just automatically going to be leveled without any say in it when if you want to renovate something and you need a special permit to renovate it if you want to increase the square footage. But because of, by right, this house can just be knocked down. And so this is what I would consider, to your point, a bad renovation or a bad project. And I understand that, you don't want people to be able to change their windows and things like that because, you need to fix an old house because they'll fall down on you. But it's just unfortunate that this house could be gutted inside and be made a beautiful house, even expanded for people that want more living space. But right now, it's just going to completely densify our neighborhood. And it's a crying shame that it's going to be there's going to be a wrecking ball. And I know you can't do anything about it because it's procedural, but it's something I wouldn't want to see happening to anybody else's neighborhood. You live around the corner. It's sad, but I hope you'll take this into consideration, going forward, or, maybe they won't issue the demo permit, but it's just a shame that a nice old house is just going to be knocked down and densified the neighborhood, and the trees are just, it's a shame. And I respect the neighborhood, and I think I've made my house look nicer, put a coat of paint on it, and I respect my neighbors in the neighborhood, and I just wish that, and I understand tax dollars and this and the other thing, but I just hope that you'll consider, would you call it bifurcating the process a bit, and to prevent things like this from happening. I totally am in support of what you mentioned. But thank you for your time. I appreciate you just hearing me out.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you. Sir.
Thank you. My name is Lauren Cook. My wife Brenda and I have been residents of Arlington for the last 10 years. For the 30 years before that, we lived in Belmont. And we've enjoyed living in Arlington. But during that 10-year period, and I speak in favor of the proposal that was made tonight, and hope that you see it as a beginning in whatever form it ultimately takes. But it's only a beginning. And my one observation, having lived now in the town for 10 years, and we live over on Winchester Road, is the proliferation of the number of tear-downs that have occurred just in that area. It is pretty amazing. And it's to the detriment of the town. It is really affecting the quality of the neighborhood. We've used the example of 21 Hutchison Road that we have. The cat's out of that, that ship has sailed, or whatever other metaphor I want to use. But those trees are gone. They're gone. There was no requirement for anyone in the town to weigh in on. It's just as a matter of right, hundreds of years of tree growth have gone. That tree, we could join our hands together. We could not, the one I just drove by there today, it's got to be well over 100 years old, as were the 5 or 6 other trees that were back there. And somebody can come in and take them out, and no one in the town, no official in the town, whatever, has the right to say anything about it. And then, of course, the second phase of this is, as our neighbor has already told you, where once sat a very lovely, architecturally appropriate house of 2,500 square feet, there will now be 8,000 square feet of living area there. What do you think that does to a neighborhood? So this is a subject matter. You're going to hear more and more about it. The towns in the surrounding areas have dealt with it or have started to deal with it and so forth, and it's going to be a subject matter that you're going to have to deal with. And this is a good start, but something really needs to be done. Are you going to lose the town that you all serve, and I'm sure a lot of you grew up in it? But I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to this? Mr. Weltle.
Bruce Weltle,
You can pull it
precinct.
down if you want.
Bruce Weltle, precinct 12, 94 Coolidge Road for 47 years. I don't want to start out by alienating you, but I don't always watch all of your broadcasts. but I happened to tune in between channel twiddling from MSNBC, and I heard the gentleman whose name I don't know, but whose customer I have been, the owner of Cambridge Landscape Company for many years. There are two subjects. I don't even know what you were all talking about, but when I heard the Hutchinson Road property mentioned, I said to myself, I think that is the Fowl Reed Wyman house that Patricia Fitzmaurice of the old Schwam Mill, who saved that building from being demolished in about 1969, also moved the Schwam Mill Preservation Trust to the ownership of to make sure it got into proper hands. I want to speak on two particular subjects: trees and predatory development of Arlington that pays more attention to commercial developers who are interested in subdividing, hydraulic fracturing, and maximizing the envelope of buildable houses. On the tree matter, I haven't been up to Hutchinson Road lately to see what is going on, but there was a great deal of attention given in past years to ensuring that that house be preserved. It is believed to be the oldest surviving house in Arlington. And if the snippets that I heard on television before I put shoes on and decided to come down here are accurate, it is an absolute outrage that something could happen to that property.
It's a different house.
Okay, so it's a different house, but it's next door. But it is, but that, all right, well, that fits in with my hobby horse, my theme. It is a neighborhood. They're not individual houses. And I did hear Ms. Rose speaking of Orvis Road, where you have a cluster of different houses, small ones, the kind that on the one hand, as municipal officials, you are all concerned with affordable housing. And on the other hand, you have predatory developers, some of whom live in Arlington, and make a great deal about what good neighbors and historic preservationists they are, and some don't live in Arlington, trying to put 4,000 square foot houses, 8,000 square foot houses on lots that were once upon a time 50 foot wide. I live next door to a house, to an open lot, excuse me, it was 5,000 square feet that has miraculously been converted into a 6,000 square feet house. And full disclosure, I and neighbors are suing the town of Arlington for actions of your Conservation Commission. And fortunately, Town Council Mr. Heim is working with our council to stay a proceeding so that we can pursue this through a court appeal with the Superior Court. That's neither here nor there, but the trees that we have lost because of the storm, where you see you have 2 feet, 2.5 feet for an oak tree of 80 years old that with a northwesterly or northeasterly wind got taken down. We're losing those. We need more space around those trees. How do we get more space? We enable people who own private properties, private ways, to allow large trees like the 100-year-old cedar tree and the 80-year-old silver maple tree on my property and the adjacent property to have sufficient root base area. Trees and our useless tree bylaw at the moment that is a cost of doing business for developers of properties on, for example, Webb Cowett Road is an absurdity. So the tree issue is one side, and 4,000 square foot houses, 6,000 square foot houses on lots that were intended for a mom and pop post-war cottage, Cape Cod house, are destroying the character of this town. And I'm glad to see people who are here for 10 and 15 years who cherish that. I'm not a townie, I'm not a native. I grew up in Baltimore. I am therefore a Baltimorean. But New England is our home and has been for 50 years. And I really think we need to do something about taking into account the concerns of property owners who have come here to stay, not people who are looking for a quick profit from predatory development and a quick flip. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weltel. Mr. Heim.
Mr. Curo, if the board will indulge me for a moment, because I think that from what I'm hearing, this is a very important discussion. There's a lot of parallel things being discussed tonight, and they're not all speaking to the same issue. The overall development of a property like 21 Hutchinson Road, which looks like a beautiful house as far as I can tell, so I'm sympathetic to what people are saying, has more to do with minimum lot size in terms of subdividing a lot and then building enormous houses on it. That is a zoning problem. Historic structure, and the house may well be worthy of historic protection, is another issue that should have a separate set of criteria. In other words, I just want folks to understand that there's different reasons the Hutchinson Road project, which is a little bit out of the scope of what Mr. Cardin is talking about, is happening. And this particular discussion wouldn't necessarily be the way of addressing the problem that people are discussing on Hutchinson Road. The second thing I want to mention, and I don't want to sound defensive, but in representing our tree committee, this board, the town manager, a lot of other folks, we did not have a tree protection bylaw until a little over a year and a half ago. And the tree committee pulled this one together at a special town meeting because folks thought this was an urgent problem. Secondly, the tree protection bylaw, and the gentleman, I don't see him here, but the tree protection bylaw
Back there.
does not have a $500 fine for violating the terms of the bylaw. It has a $500 mitigation fee that goes into the tree protection fund, and the Board of Selectmen, at the tree committee's recommendation, is looking at whether or not they should amend the town bylaws, and indeed, I think they're gonna vote on this tonight, that instead of having a set fee in the town bylaws, that annually, this board could set the fee per DBH inch and adjust it to make it go up if it seems like it needs to go up, or alternatively make it go down if it needs to go down. I'm aware that in Concord, they charge about $350 to $375 per DBH. That's a big jump from $500 for a mitigation fee to go up to almost $4,000 per tree if you've got a 10-inch DBH tree. And so I think the selectmen are considering this issue, and there will be a public hearing if that bylaw is passed to be able to adjust this fee and make it more robust. But there are other provisions in the tree protection bylaw that speak, A, to fines for removing trees that you don't have permission to remove that is separate from the $500 mitigation fee. There's also potential injunctive relief available to the town if we find that someone is willfully violating the bylaw. So I don't think that the tree protection bylaw should be characterized as weak or meaningless. A gentleman did stop by my office, didn't have an appointment on Friday to talk to me, I think, about this issue, but I've had a full schedule, so it's Monday. I did get a chance to talk to the building inspector today, who represented that Mr. Lequeve, the tree warden, was aware of it. So without having all the facts, I don't want to make this hearing about a warrant article about a specific property, but what I do want folks to know is that this tree protection bylaw is new. The tree protection bylaw is something that the tree committee is working very hard to make sure it's robust enough to protect the interests of Arlington. And I don't want to put Mr. Lequeve on the spot. I don't know what he said, but if the trees are allowed to be removed because they are trees that are not within, if they're protected trees and they can be removed, they have to submit a plan. And among that plan, they have mitigation options. Now, if those mitigation options aren't sufficient, I hear what Mr. I think Kelly is saying, that we need to dramatically improve or increase fines so that it's not just seen as a cost of doing business that people can absorb and won't protect our tree canopy sufficiently. But what I want folks to know is that there are other measures in that tree bylaw that punish people for violating the tree bylaw intentionally and willfully, that punish folks for taking down trees that they're not supposed to take down until they have a approved tree mitigation plan by the tree warden. And Ms. Stamps may want to speak to that as well, but I just want folks to know that. And then finally, I also want folks to know that this board and town meeting created the good neighbor notification, what was it, just last year? Previously, there were no notifications for something that was as of right. I'm not saying this, again, to advocate a specific position. I appreciate Mr. Weddle's comment, because it's a complicated thing when you're talking about people's individual property rights versus community interests, and the town sometimes is involved in litigation through its boards and stuff like that, but it's not always an acrimonious thing. Sometimes people just have different perspectives on things. But I just want folks to know that this Board of Selectmen and your town meeting has been improving the protections that are available, whereas just 2 years ago, there wasn't a tree protection bylaw, there wasn't a neighborhood notification bylaw, and there wasn't a proposal like Mr. Carden is presenting here to potentially expand the historic commission and demolition bylaws. So I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn. I just want folks to know that these are things that people have been actively working on. It's not just something that we've been sort of passively sitting by and watching folks complain about.
Thank you, Mr. Heim, for that synopsis. Thank you. Ms. Stamps.
Pull it down.
Pull it down.
I'm Susan Stamps. I'm on the tree committee, and I just wanted to assure everyone, especially our audience at home, that the town has a tree committee. We are working very, very hard, as town council said, to save trees in the town. We know that Arlington loves its trees. And it's very, very clear. We got the tree protection bylaw passed 2 years ago. It wasn't everything we wanted, but like it's always the way it is, you do what you can do. And we've come back not even 2 years later to ask for an amendment, so it's not a flat fee anymore for taking down a tree. It's a per inch of width of the tree to replace the tree. So we actually can replace the tree. It was a revolutionary step the town meeting took 2 years ago. It was the first time Arlington had ever regulated the removal of trees on private property. It was a very exciting thing. Now it's time to toughen it up, make it stricter. And I just wanted you to know that your tree committee gets it. And we're working very hard to do everything we can to increase the tree canopy and prevent loss of the tree canopy as much as possible. That was all I wanted to say.
I don't know. Was that the last person? I don't want to.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak to this warrant article?
What I wanted to say was the warrant article that we're talking about that will go before town meeting, this town meeting, which starts, as you all know, the last Monday in April, I believe is Article 14. So if you go on the town website and look at the regular town meeting, not a special town meeting, if you look at Article 14, in there, similar to the remarks, I believe, by Mr. Kelly and others, cites exactly what he said in terms of right now we just have a flat fee and it's just the cost of doing business. And the board had a hearing on that, talking about, you know, right now they're saying 50 dBB diameter per DBH, maybe go up to 100, but as what you all know is this warrant article, Article 14, when it's heard at town meeting, this is just getting it on there. So whether you're a town meeting member or if you're not a town meeting member, you can contact your town meeting member from your precinct and say, would you either A, put in substitute motion to what you think the correct amount should be, or you may say, I would like to do that, could you introduce me and I can get up there? Because believe me, there'll be other town meeting members who'd say, it should be 100, it should be 75, it should be 200, et cetera. So I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying that that's another, this will be, and I think this will be a lively debate at town meeting, because it's a very important issue, and none of us, town council and the Board of Selectmen on down, want to pass this off on you all that, you know, yes, we do have the tree committee. It's just barely 2 years old. Unfortunately, I wish I had the foresight that we did this 10 years ago or 6 years ago, but what I do want to say is we are trying to address it, but make sure, again, the famous political phrase, unintended consequences, but any information or suggestions that you all want to give, and if you don't want to contact a town meeting member, you can call the selectman's office and leave that message with Mrs. Kropelka to suggest to one of us. And I feel terrible seeing the devastation in this neighborhood. Went through it with Webb Cowett. I thought that was like one of the worst things I've ever seen. And this, by far, eclipses that, which is really very sad. I'm not trying to make light of it, but, and, you know, I grew up in East Arlington, I grew up in the project, so I can't give any historical information on trees or anything like that. But now, you know, having raised a family here, some people may say, oh, you're a crazy tree hugger, but it's way beyond that. It's the content of the neighborhood and what the facade's going to look like. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Article 14 of the regular town meeting.
Yeah, well,
Excuse me.
I'm kind of sick to my stomach here. We're selling our house. We can't stand the neighbors. No, I'm kidding. We're downsizing. Both my kids have moved out. We do have a 4,000-something square foot. And but what has been so interesting, we first put it on the market in August, and we have so many people that come in and have viewed it, at least 50, I'd say. And by far, the major comment is, oh, it's too large, oh, it's too old, you know, it was built in 1916. And, you know, our real estate agent, well, the new buyers, they're looking for, you know, the brand-new spanking type homes and stuff. But we actually had someone who wanted to buy it and tear it down, and we said, absolutely not, because, well, I'm going to be sick not to live there anymore. I'd be sicker if it wasn't still there in the years to come. But we're working on it, but there's more to go, more to be done.
Mr. Greeley, my colleagues, Ms. Rowe, and then Mr. Dunn.
I am, as many people know, I am somebody who loves trees, but I also believe in saving old houses, and whether they're small old houses like bungalows or the house on your road that you all are trying to protect probably without any luck. And I still think that we should try to do something in the spirit of let's make some progress now instead of waiting another year and putting it into a study with the wonderful people that are already working on this. I think that we should try to take Len's warrant article, separate it from the old historic preservation, demolition, delay bylaw. That's something that has been on the books in Massachusetts for 100 years. It's used all over the Commonwealth. It's very common. And let's do a different kind of bylaw. And I don't know that we can do it in a week, but let's try something that tries to protect some of these neighborhood houses of varying sizes. And, you know, it doesn't really matter. Mass Historical Commission uses 50 years as an old house. That's their standard, 50. And so I'm a really old house. But I really think that we're trying to work on our trees. We have a demolition delay permit that the Historical Commission is supposed to oversee. But let's make a start on Len's idea. And I know I'm in the minority, but I just want to say my piece because this has been something that I've cared about for years and years and years. It's one of the reasons I started the Arlington Land Trust. We don't have much land, and the reason it was started was to save what we have, to save the character of our town, and I really think we need to get a start. So I may be voted down, but that's what I'd like to see.
What's the motion?
The motion is that I'd like to have a motion to see if we could separate Len's warrant article from the traditional historic preservation demolition delay and try to write some language that begins to take into account existing houses that are in a neighborhood that are over 50 years old, of varying sizes, and maybe we start with a process of, you know, you have to notify, building on the good neighbor situation where you have to notify everybody within 100 feet of your house or 200 feet of your house that this is what you're planning to do, so that there's some town involvement earlier in the process. And I think that would help. I don't think it's going to help all of you, but I think we've got to start somewhere, and I'd like to see Len's work on this as a start to it. So that's my very convoluted motion.
I thought that was included in that. I thought I said no action on what he initially presented to us, but then when we opened on March 13th for the special, some were doubting whether anything could get done, but I had said if you can get something done, even if it's one piece of this, and everybody says it's ready to go, because I wasn't here, anything was ready to go. But my motion included, if you can get something, we'll put it on the special, but they have to get it done in like about a week and a half, which if you can, that's great. And I think Ms. Rowe's given better guidance than I did. I just said if you can get something done, do it. But, so if you can get something done, especially what she said. So, but Ms. Rowe made a motion, I think, and Mr. Gurley seconded it, and I'll be happy to vote that officially, so
But originally it was my motion, Dave.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Gurley's motion, seconded, yeah.
But
Well, I know I chatted on it.
But I'm throwing
Where's that demolition thing?
I'm demolitioning that motion, and I'm going with Ms. Rowe's motion, so I'm withdrawing it.
Okay. So
Okay,
there's a
Mr.
motion by Ms. Rowe then, in that case, and
Yes.
seconded by
Mr. Greeley?
Greeley?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Dunn?
So you want to try to get something done on the regular?
Mr. Hyam has an idea.
Mr. Curo, may I don't think we can get something done on the regular. The way the warrant article, and Mr. Cardin highlighted this, the way the warrant article is written, it's proposing to make a change. You can't make the change without including those, you know, that scope.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I think I'm being directed to consider is whether or not something could be put on the special.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
That
I
would
know
be
I
great.
had that conversation, folks.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is just water, I swear to God.
And I'll try to help you, Lynn.
Mr. Dunn? did you have
I'm totally fine with it under the special.
Yeah,
I couldn't,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't see how to shoehorn it into the regular. I didn't expect to learn so much about Hutchinson Road tonight. It's interesting, I'm definitely, I'll say that, like, part of what I said at the opening of this is, I stand by, which is that some of these tear downs we've seeing are good and some of them are bad. And sorting through them is the hard part. And not only, it's not just sorting through them, but also figuring out like how to not affect like literally everything else in this bylaw. So,
That's why I think
yeah.
we stop
Yep.
doing the demolition one, because the
And figure out a different.
preservation one is so,
Okay.
it's been used, it has standards, and I think we
Yep.
start
Yep.
there.
And I totally do agree. This is not something that I want at all. And I fought really hard to get the tree bylaw in that we have now, and I agree that it is not doing the job it needs to do. And I do want to make it better.
And I'll be supporting the motion also, and this is devastation, and I'm really sorry that we're too late on this. I do get nervous. I mean, in the spirit of the opening quote tonight, I do get a little nervous that as we move, quickly here, that we did work hard on the tree preservation bylaw, and we're seeing that we have to go back even after all that deliberation and fix it. But let's give it a go. I mean, given that there are precedents in other communities that we can look to on this, let's give it a go and try to get something onto the special. And then we'll have another hearing in that case. Is the way that's the way this, just for anyone who's trying to follow what we're talking about, annual town meeting commences at the end of April. What the warrant opens and closes on that, but we always have a special town meeting within the annual, which is a way for us to get basically late proposals in if we have to. So it's really having a separate hearing for a newly revised proposal. It's completely procedural, but it will give us another shot at this and give us a little bit more time to work it and try to bring it before. It's the same group, but it's just a procedural quirk. Just second nature up here, but just want to try to footnote that. So is there any further discussion on the motion that's before us? Motion by Ms. Rowe, second by Mr. Greeley. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much for all the work. Thank you, everyone, for all of your testimony on this. I'm really sorry, again, that we are too late on this, but I think that your witness on this will be important as we continue the discussion with other neighbors.
Thank you, Len.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Can I just say, is this also the house that used to light up those trees? Or is that's yours? That's a nice job, Mr. Kelly. I love that. I love that. I used to light my big tree as well, but it fell down in the hurricane. Sorry, go ahead.
We now move on to Article 18, Home Rule Legislation, Appointment of Town Controller. We have our, okay, the Town Council does have preference, okay. We have our esteemed Treasurer, Mr. Carmen, who has AV.
I couldn't see him back there.
Should I tell you guys how to do your job? A lot of these people are here coming to the selectmen's meetings. You might want to tell them that it won't be looked down upon if they leave.
Yeah.
You know, if they hear about accountants, they can leave.
It is, Dean, it is good, though, to see the sausage
You're
being
welcome
made.
to stay.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Because we,
I'm sure they're all DVRing it when they get home or whatever, TiVo. Or...
You know what DBH stands for?
diameter at breast height. Yeah. What is it? Diameter at breast height.
So are these
Maybe that's
combined?
why I had such a hard time
Just
getting it
next
out.
to warrant articles combined?
I think he's going to talk about them combined.
Doing them together.
Would you like me to?
Fantastic.
Oh, will you?
Yeah,
sure.
We even get Sandy here tonight.
This is where the treasurer holds us all to our campaign promises.
It's going to be great. It's
Yeah,
going to
I
be
know,
great.
it's
So this
excellent.
slide presentation is fantastic because I only created 2 slides. So I just took a whole bunch of slides that Adam had created years ago. I just
And
exported.
consolidated them,
I
yeah.
exported them. I added some other stuff that you guys wrote, and then I just hit print. It was lovely. So, and then I claimed credit for it. It was great. So Article 19, home rule legislation. So I'm going to do them backwards because in speaking to them, it's easier to talk about 19, where we create a consolidated finance department, and then 18, where we put the comptroller into the consolidated finance department. So here is the recommended vote that town council had submitted to the board for establishing the consolidated finance department. So the highlights of it, there are 4 things. The selectmen would create the consolidated finance department, hereby created a consolidated finance department. The manager would appoint the finance director, and then the bylaw is specifically written to provide long-term flexibility. So currently, if you think about the structure of the town, we would I'm not speaking for Adam, but it's more likely than not, he would appoint the current deputy town manager as the first finance director. But in 30 years, the needs of the town might change. And, you know, we might have, in 20 years, we might have a town treasurer who's been here for 20 years and might be the right choice to also have the title of finance director or a long-term comptroller or the assistant town manager. So the language in there that says that the finance director can also hold the position of comptroller, treasurer, deputy town manager, assistant town manager is designed to provide long-term flexibility. So we don't have to come back to town meeting over and over again over the course of however many years as the needs of the town change. And then the rest of it is sort of the, you know, sworn in, faithful execution of the office, et cetera, et cetera. So moving on to the next
The
slide.
gender-neutral language on that.
Oh, because I wrote it, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I did do that, yes.
So modest.
So moving, yeah, that is one of my slides, right? That's one of my 3. So moving on, so just a quick background. So 2011, 2012, you know, in 2011, Article 51 came before town meeting to research a consolidated town and school finance department. The Department of Revenue came in January 2012 and reviewed our financial structure, made recommendations. Among them were having an appointed treasurer, changing the appointment authority of the comptroller and the assessor underneath the consolidated finance department, and then having a head of the consolidated finance department. Then in 2012, Article 32 special town meeting, the town meeting voted to receive the DOR report. So continue to the next slide. So fall 2012, the town manager formed a coordinated finance stakeholders group to have internal discussion, work on what a consolidated finance department would look like. Group had representative town departments and oversight boards, and it met approximately 10 times to formulate recommendations. So about that time, our esteemed chair was running for the Board of Selectmen. And one of the questions he was asked was, do you support a consolidated finance department? So if you can move to the next slide. And he said, I quote, I support efforts to reform and reorganize Arlington's financial management structures, implementing recent recommendations of the Department of Revenue and a manager that is consistent with our town's values, et cetera, et cetera. And everybody but Clarissa might want to not laugh. So, continuing.
You're the only one who's.
No, look, and one thing I should point out is I did put 4 quotes from 4 of the 5 members of the board in here. And the real reason I did it, besides I thought it was kind of fun, is when you have a hearing like this at the selectmen, you start the narrative and the story of what we're doing and what we go to town meeting and things like that. And something that's really been frustrating to me when I talk to people about this is some people who haven't been informed of the process over the last 8 years or 7 years have said, well, I'm really glad that you're doing this. And I think to myself, you know, you're pushing it and you've got this great idea. I think, well, that's awesome, because in 2013, when I was on the Finance Committee, I voted against it. So I'm glad you're giving me all the credit for the work that we've kind of caught up to what the selectmen already have believed in for like 5-6 years. So 2013, the town manager submits Article 22 for home rule legislation to town meeting. It had a hearing at the Finance Committee, as I had mentioned. I voted against it. Finance Committee recommended no action. At the time, I think that was the right answer, because if you looked at the people and the personnel in place at time, it would have just been this long, ugly, ugly battle. And then after the Finance Committee voted no action, town manager graciously came to the selectmen and asked them to support the vote of no action. The selectmen voted 4-1 to support the vote of no action, with Mr. Greeley voting in the negative. So moving on to the next slide, Mr. Greeley ran for election that year and was asked, what would you like to see in fiscal reorganization plan for the town? Now, I like this quote because I learned something about it. Mr. Greeley wrote, I support the warrant article that will be before town meeting that recommended we put together a professional management department in Arlington. In Massachusetts, of 65 communities with a population of more than 30,000, only 5 have not taken this step. We need to move our financial management into the 21st century. And so I think that was great, because I didn't realize, I read it at the time and it never even resonated with me that was, 5 years ago. I would assume it's gone even further. There are only 5 towns in our situation right now. Everyone's sort of moving ahead and modernizing, and we're stuck in the mud.
I should have said thank you, Adam Chapdelaine, for that information.
Aha, okay.
It came out of 2013.
Time for review.
This remained our organization structure. You'd see how hard it was to get the silos Adam had in 5 years ago out, but I did it. And so we have one silo on the left that the Board of Selectmen has the manager, deputy manager, and purchasing department. The second silo, the Board of Selectmen has the comptroller. The comptroller's on silo. The treasurer collector is a elected official is in a silo, and the Board of Assessment is in a silo. And this is the problem we've talked about for years, which is when everybody's in their own bucket or their own lane, it's very difficult to coordinate amongst groups and get work done efficiently. So moving on, we get to 2015, we have some progress. Article 15 comes before town meeting, which is home rule legislation to change the appointment of the Board of Assessors. The proposal was to change the hiring and supervising authority of the Director of Assessment from the assessors to the town manager. And that incremental change passed town meeting 11676, which I sort of read the tea leaves of saying, while we couldn't get support for broad-based change, as long as we were chipping at these things one at a time, we might have a chance. So that changed our org structure. So now that first silo, the Board of Assessors silo on the far right, got broken down and it moved over to the left. But if you notice, there's not a lot of organization. Everybody's reporting directly to the town manager, a lot of people. So on the next slide, we move to 17. Now we start to pick up some steam. We have 2 candidates running for the Board of Selectmen who are talking about a consolidated finance department. I'm running for treasurer, talking about professionalization, consolidation, and coordination. I put 2018, I meant 17. Article 19, this Board of Selectmen puts on the warrant to change the treasurer from an elected to appointed office. That passes town meeting 154-57. So now we've gone from 60% town meeting support for professionalization to 75%. We're really moving. And then we have a ballot question coming up April 17th to make it officially elected. April 7th.
April 7th.
April 7th, sorry.
Do not state that.
What I said,
election date
15th?
incorrectly, please.
You could,
I'm going to count.
You could get the history wrong all you want, but don't
Hey,
get election day wrong.
Right. So, question to Mr. Dunn, do you support a consolidated finance department? I support this proposal. We can make our finance teams more efficient if we put them on the same technology platform aligned under a single leader. The important thing to remember is the difference between the town's policymaking role and professional roles, which I think is very well said. And then moving on to Ms. Mahan to round it out.
Oh, that pissed
Same question. I support the consolidation of town and school financial management operations with an appointed treasurer as it's recommended by the Department of Revenue in the department's April analysis of 2012. At present, there is no one individual or committee with the authority to coordinate the town's finances. Town manager has provided informal direction to the various individuals and committees tasked with managing the town's finances. But as the report notes, quote, cooperation is voluntary and none of these officials can be held accountable by the manager. So as we move on, so there have been some changes though. There is some good news and the board was part of this. So in April 2017, the deputy town manager and treasurer entered into a memorandum of understanding endorsed by this board that we were going to work in unison as if we were a coordinated, finance department. So we started working on that. To do that, as you recall, we reorganized some personnel in the treasurer's office where Mike Morris is the department head. Karen Riley's taken on a larger role behind him, and it's worked out great. And then And then starting in May, we started to work as a consolidated member of the team, with Sandy being, as deputy town manager, being the, unofficial finance director. So that changes our effective, what I call our effective org structure. It's not our legal statutory structure, but that's how things have been working since that point in time. We've now kind of cut down the silo, and, the treasurers in my office and the assessors are, working with the deputy town manager to create more consolidation. It's interesting, I will note as an aside, if the comptroller was still in his position, I would have put him over there because he was part of the discussion and work, but it seemed quite odd, since he wasn't here to speak for himself, to put him there, so I pushed it back. Okay, moving on. So, I think as a former finance committee member, I can say jokingly that like 2 weeks ago on that 80-degree Wednesday day, that I think it might have been the counter effect of hell freezing over, because in this month, my great friends on the finance committee, who I served with for 12 years, endorsed both of these articles, which was fantastic. The consolidated finance, they endorsed unanimously, and then by a vote of 11-3, they supported the change of the comptroller appointment process. Now, in the article that's before you, they've suggested some changes that I put into it. So your article is there. It's the original vote I put in front of them plus the changes. So I think when I'll go over it, it really made it stronger. So that's sort of where we are right now. So improvements that are happening. So why does consolidated finance work, and what are the benefits we can get out, what we're getting out of it so far? So the first one, which I thought was crazy when I got there, is we didn't have monthly finance department meetings because cooperation was voluntary. So after we signed the memorandum of understanding, we coordinated. The first thing Sandy did as deputy town manager was start having monthly meetings. Let's have monthly meetings. Let's go over where we are. Let's go over key issues, how we can help each other. And you think it's a simple concept, right? And it leads to great results, as you'd expect. Whereas, if we're putting out the bond offertory statement in the treasurer's office, we don't have to sneak around and ask people for stuff and kind of beg and plead for them to help. We have a centralized group where we can talk and work together and get things done. So that's been fantastic. It's also helped with improved coordination on the Munis and Invoice Cloud rollout, because again, you can bring all the stakeholders into the room, whether it's the assessors, IT, everybody's there as a team. It's not voluntary anymore. And you work together and you have a better sense of camaraderie and wanting to help each other out. The last bullet point, which was also kind of interesting, was one of the big functions of the treasurer's office is to get our credit rating, is to go do our S&P presentation. And it wasn't until I got to the treasurer's office that I found out how backwards it was. And because the treasurer's and town manager's office are two different offices, what formerly happened was we'd go into this, remember, this is you have to keep a AAA rating. It's an important meeting. So the treasurer's office would create a presentation, 20 minutes. It would answer some of the questions that were asked, but it wouldn't answer all of the questions that were asked. We'd go through it, and then at the conclusion of it, it would hand it over to the town manager's office to fill in all the gaps on questions I think they may have received like a day before. And it really just didn't work. I mean, it's really not the way you should be having a professional process. It's frustrating, it's aggravating, it doesn't work. So under our coordinated approach, what Sandy and I did is we met a few days ahead of time. So you get 20 questions from them, 24 questions. And we created a presentation that just answered the questions. And so the process used to take about an hour, and it would be the two silos that would work on in the meeting. Instead, what we did is we just said, all right, they want to talk about budget. So they had 7 questions on budget. Sandy answered those. It was right in the presentation. Then they have 7 questions on managing the town. We hand it over to Adam. He answers those. 6 questions on general government issues. I did those. We were on and off the call in 29 minutes. And that was a call that used to take upwards of an hour. And it was disjointed and it was odd. And that's just the type of things when you don't have to have mandatory cooperation. I can feel the frustration that comes from some of the other departments. You say, wow, this is a lot more work, effort, putting it together, presenting it than it should be. These calls should be 28, 29 minutes when you have the strength of Arlington. So we move on. So obviously, as we've talked about, here are goals of the Consolidated Finance Department: eliminating the silo effect, efficiency, better reporting processes. And as someone who serves on the Finance Committee, it's interesting that, the budget book is reported differently than some of the other internal documents and the town manager's report. And it's because different groups are putting things together. And it's frustrating. You want to be able to have one chronological order. Everything works. Everything's easy to understand. And there's one person to hold accountable for that organization. Here we talked about information sharing. And then the last, career paths, which I put somewhere else. This is also, I think, very, very important. in creating, and I talk about this on the comptroller slide, because one of the things that we've learned as we've gone out for a search for a new comptroller is there's a tightening of the municipal finance market. There aren't a lot of people out there. I mean, we actually had to put post the job twice to be able to get a candidate pool that we were happy with. And I think by creating this consolidated finance department, you create career paths for people. So if you show up in the town of Arlington and you're young and energetic and you want to stay here a long time, you have somewhere to go. Whereas right now, because you have these buckets, there's nowhere to go. I mean, you move into one department, you're in that department. And there's nobody sort of above you that's watching out and saying, well, we could groom this person and bring them to the next level so we can start hiring internally versus having to have every single finance department hire be external, which it is right now. So this is what a consolidated finance structure would ultimately look like, taking liberties, assuming that Adam would make the deputy town manager the finance director, which I'm guessing he would. All right, so why, oh, sorry.
Could I ask a question before you go to comptroller?
Do whatever you want, your meeting.
So, would you go back, I'm sorry,
Please.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
So, now it looks weird to me that the Board of Assessors is out there.
Well, I didn't want to delete them.
Huh?
I didn't want to delete them.
No, I understand, but would an ideal combined finance department have them within?
So
I know
that's
they're
the
elected,
board
but
of
I
the
know that
elected board. The assessor's down below on the two up on the right, or one up on the right.
I think my observation on that would be that probably, if we really wanted to represent it, there's a dotted line there from Board of
There
Assessors.
is.
Director,
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
That's right, I should have put it,
Thanks,
but
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Ms. Mahan.
Just on this point here, just going to share, which I've done with you before, one of my major frustrations with this, and this is where my conspiracy theory hat's going to come out. I definitely said what I said, but one of the things that I really see missing here, what got us started down this road, was after me 7 years, which is a conversation I had about the comptroller oversight issue, but I feel that's been resolved. For 7 years, I was banging my head with every town and school official about, going over the budget and going over audits and things that were not correct. And then what happened was, the then superintendent and school committee presented audit of the school side, because if you notice my quote, it says, "I support a consolidated town and school." I don't see any school here. They've been slamming the door shut. The reason we went down this road is because they forged their own Powers and Sullivan audit, which I presented at town meeting. And as a result of that, Powers and Sullivan came out and addressed the then superintendent and school committee and said, you cannot do that. When you get this book, you can't even Xerox a page, even if you Xerox it word for word, unless you have our permission. They totally rewrote it. So what happened was, back in 2012, as you know, DOR came in, did their analysis, came out with like 47, 57, something 7 recommendations, the majority of which reflected the school side, because that's, and the reason we went down that road is after all this came out, some people came up to me and said, you know what was done was illegal. You could report that. You cannot mess with these, and correct me if I'm wrong on these Powers and Sullivan audit, you can't do that. And the then town manager said to me, which was not Mr. Chapdelaine, there were different faces, because this was a 7-year fight, now it's up to almost 11, 12 years. I said, all I want is, if we're going to, basically when DOR came out with their recommendations, the selectmen were willing to say, okay, we'll take, and the school committee said no to everything. And in my opinion, they're still saying no to everything. And the reason we started this was basically, in my personal only opinion, an issue that we had with the school side. And I was told from then, once we started this, once the selectmen do it, the schools will follow. I don't see that. Now, that doesn't mean I want to stop that process, but I just want to make it clear that I'm in favor of this town and school, and the schools are blatantly absent. And I don't know what we can do to foster that relationship. Some may say it's the voters to take them to task, but I think it's a lot of us giving them pressure. So I do want to continue. I'm in favor of everything that you're doing, but I kind of feel like we're cleaning up our act that we really were doing a pretty good job at, but we could have done it better. And the core root of the problem, which was how the schools are functioning in terms of what they do. They've gotten a little bit better. They have a new CFO. They really need to come along in this journey because it was their, I call it tale of two audits, that started this whole ball rolling, and they're nowhere to be seen. So I'm kind of using this as a bully pulpit. I'm definitely in favor of that, but what I would say to the town manager and Mr. Carmen as treasurer or as an individual and anyone else, we really need to get the schools along because we started down this journey because of something that they did that was wrong. And in my opinion, they're just burying their head in the sand and saying, you guys do everything you can, do everything 100% right. We're going to keep doing, I won't say the phrase of what I say, how they do their budgets and things over there. So I just want to take advantage of the opportunity that the school needs to step up, superintendent and school committee, and they should be following this along with us because most of the recommendations were to correct the inefficiencies that they were doing. So I'm a little heated about that, but I did say I'm in support of a town and school, which I don't see, consolidated finance department. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahan. I'd like to also address the presentation. First, I'd like to say, I know we're not through the comptroller part.
We're not.
We're not through the comptroller part yet, but what could be a fairly dry topic, thank you for making it an enjoyable presentation.
Oh, where do you hear my comptroller remarks? Go
Oh,
ahead.
But I think, partly to what, Ms. Mahan said, I mean, I also, and if you go back to what you had on my slide, during that whole process, I had talked to Barnstable, which had gone down this road, and I supported that. But I think there's something that we've learned through this process, and you highlighted it at a couple of points here, is that the only way that we can make this successful as we move incrementally towards this is to get buy-in of each of the parties and incrementally build trust. So that's what I've seen that we've done throughout this process. First step being Board of Assessors, because frankly, this board voted against that. And the reason we voted against that is we didn't feel that there was really buy-in from the Board of Assessors themselves. And that's why we didn't as a board, vote to go that way. But town meeting overruled us, and I think that since that's happened, there has been a building of trust there. The reason we didn't go ahead with the treasurer changes at that time, as we all remember, is because I think there was a lack of trust. Quite honestly, there was a lack of trust in going forward in that. And as you said, we were trying to avoid a big fight at town meeting and such. I think now with the changes that you've brought to the job and working with Mr. Pooler and with the manager, we see now incrementally we've pushed the ball forward with another level of trust. So I think that's the key, I think, as in these discussions. As we move each of these pieces into place and we're modeling that trust and an ability to work together, there may well, I mean, there could be an opening in the future to reopen that discussion across the avenue, but I think that the things that we have within our purview that, you have on the chart here, the things we have to, and of course, we're gonna have now the comptroller discussion, which also involves a leap of faith and a leap of trust on the part of this board now to give up some direct control. We'll have that discussion when we get ready to move into that. Just want to make sure Ms. Rowe and Mr. Dunn don't have anything more before we move further in the.
I'm ready
Okay.
to hear it.
Thank you.
And so the one thing, I'll just make one comment when we talk about the school department, is I did think thought a lot about the fact that the school department's not in this presentation. And ultimately, there were two reasons I decided not to talk. I didn't talk to the school department at all, and there were two reasons. The first is, like Mr. Guerrero said, I think incremental change sort of works. You chip away at it, and you build trust, and you chip away and you build trust, and it works better. The second reason is, I think unlike when I was on the finance committee and didn't have the greatest relationship with the former school CFO, a lot of people have a fantastic relationship with this school CFO, but we have to remember he's been here like 9 months. And I think it was very difficult when he was here for 3 months to say, hey, we got an idea. Why don't you listen to this? And it was tough. And so I think when he's here a year, when the school department sort of settled, remember they also have a new assistant superintendent who started about the same time. So it seemed very difficult to approach them with new people. It's okay, let's build some trust with them so they understand us, so they know where we're coming from, so they can see what we're talking about on this side of Mass Ave, and then we can go forward. So I would expect if this were to pass at town meeting, that we would start discussions with the school department on what that would look like for possibility of the next or a subsequent town meeting. So.
Thank you.
So why change the comptroller? So obviously it would become, if we do the other changes, we need the comptroller to become part of the consolidated finance team. This would put day-to-day accountability, or the comptroller would have day-to-day accountability with the direct supervisor being the finance director. As I had mentioned, it's improved career opportunities. So you could take on more responsibility. You end up with some of the moving away of the little power struggles that go on when you have these different groups. So you have more career, you can take on different things, you have more opportunity. As I mentioned, you can attract better people to the position because now they feel like there's a career path for them. And then you can develop internal talent. I mean, I think you can't understate that some of our younger internal talent on the finance side leaves. And so, this is a way to hold people in and move them up. So there are three important provisions in this presentation that I think are in, is that the next slide or did we skip over one? No, I must have missed one. I must have lost it. Can you go forward? Oh.
You have removal before selection.
No, I did that intentionally, but
okay.
There was one slide I added, and I don't have it in there right now, but that's fine. I'll read it to you afterwards. So I start with the removal because I think the removal provision is significantly more important than the retention provision because that's the safeguard of the controller as our, guardian of financial information. Yep, and that's it. So how this would work is if the town manager felt that a comptroller should be discharged, they have to go through a fairly cumbersome, laborious process to make that happen, and it's designed intentionally to be as such. You don't want the town manager or deputy town manager to just discharge a comptroller if they uncovered financial malfeasance or some sort of impropriety that would generally be embarrassing. And the thing I think about the most often I talk about the finance committee is the, overrun of the school budget that occurred back in 2011. You don't want a situation where a budget is overrun by $1 million, $1.5 million, comptroller uncovers it, and that person is discharged. So what this bylaw does is it says, so I'm going to go read through the sections. The comptroller may be removed by the town manager subject to the approval of the Board of Selectmen. Removal of the comptroller shall become effective upon approval of the selectmen. If the selectmen fail to act by approving, rejecting, or requesting additional reasonable time to consider a termination, however, removal made by the town manager shall become effective on the 15th day following the day on which notice of the proposed removal is filed with the Board of Selectmen. So I'll stop there. So a couple important things. When I talk to town council, who's not here, notice means an agenda item on the Board of Selectmen. It cannot be an other business, throw it behind and say, any new business? Yeah, I'm going to fire the comptroller. Boom, gavel out. Can't do that. Has to be an agenda item. Failure to post of it would be a violation of the open meeting law, and the town council and I were talking, while the Attorney General probably doesn't reverse many decisions that are due to violation of the open meeting law, back in dismissing a comptroller through an open meeting law violation is probably one that would be reversed pretty quickly. Because it's a meeting of the Board of Selectmen, it's a posted meeting, the selectmen have the right to reject it. It's your right to reject it out of turn. So just because the town manager put it onto the agenda doesn't mean that you even have to have a hearing on it. It just means it's an agenda. You can take it up like you do anything. Vote no action, disapproval, we're done. But it also allows you flexibility. So you can approve a disapproval, you can approve a dismissal, you can reject a dismissal, or if it's a complicated issue, you have a 2-3 hour hearing, you need more information, it gives you the wiggle room within a reasonable limit to hold it over. And the reason we have the reasonable limit is if someone's going on vacation, we were often thinking about, when town council and I were talking about that gap between your June and July meeting, where you don't have one every other week. So maybe 15 days isn't enough, maybe you need 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. So it does provide the selectmen with that flexibility. Then I continue. For purpose of this section, notice of removal shall be considered, okay, I did that, sorry. And then this, I think, is a very important section that the Finance Committee, member of the Finance Committee pointed out to me. We added, nothing in this paragraph shall supersede or abridge the comptroller's employment rights afforded by state law. And that is just reinforcing that nothing in this takes away basic rights that they have. And one right that's pointed out to me, and I don't really understand the specifics of the law, town council can correct me if I screw it up, but the comptroller in their hearing, so first of all, the comptroller has the right to attend the hearing. So their employment rights, so they can attend the hearing, they can participate in the hearing, and they can also prevent the hearing from going into executive session. They can actually have it in an open session. Why is that critically important? So let's go back to $1.5 million, right? Budget's overrun by $1.5 million, town manager's embarrassed, tries to fire the comptroller. We come to an open session, town manager says, you know what, we should have this in executive session. And the comptroller can say, no, in open session, we're gonna talk about how he overspent the budget by $1.5 million and is trying to fire me for it. That is a protection that is afforded an employee under state law, and that is why we wrote it in there, because we wanna make this process as difficult as possible. It's not terminating somebody because you don't like them. It's not terminating somebody because they've embarrassed you. It is terminating somebody because they're not doing their job. And so we go to the next slide. So that's just the elements I talked about, so we can go past that. Selection provision. So we changed the selection provision. So it's a lot of what goes on right now, actually. So it says, the town manager shall also appoint upon merit and fitness alone the town's comptroller, subject to approval of the Board of Selectmen. Appointment of the comptroller shall become effective upon the approval of the selectmen, and then it says if you don't do anything for 30 days, it becomes official, which is sort of the way I said you can't take somebody, you can't bring them all the way to the final of a selection process and then just hold them out there in perpetuity. And I think this is a strong provision that, as written, will maintain the actual current hiring process, because while it says that the town manager can hire a suitable person, because the town manager needs the approval of the Board of Selectmen, the selectmen can give strong guidance on how this process can go. So if the town manager says, well, I don't want to have a search committee, I don't want to have anyone involved, I just want to make the selection myself, well, this board can respond by saying, well, that's fine, well, we're going to reject every single person that you bring forward in that manner. And so it would force the board to have a say in how we're going to hire the comptroller and go forth there. And then there's a third section in this, which I thought I added this morning. I apologize. I'm going to read it to you. And I think this is another add-on that has happened recently. And it says, notwithstanding, is the last paragraph of the article, notwithstanding the foregoing section C, the comptroller shall be authorized to report directly to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen or any member of the board on any matter in the town at any time without the necessity of prior approval from any town manager or official. And so this paragraph says very clearly that the comptroller can talk to the selectmen at any time about any topic. Now, it's interesting because this is written intentionally vague to allow for anything. So if you read it, so it says, so what can you talk about? They report directly to the chair of the Board of Selectmen or any member of the board on any matter in the town at any time. Okay? So if you don't like if the comptroller doesn't like the color of my shirt, if the comptroller doesn't like the color of this room, I mean, obscure things, right? But that's what you want in this article. You don't want something that says the comptroller can talk about financial matters. It's like, no, you need a broad range because you don't know what the comptroller might want to bring to the Board of Selectmen or be concerned about and things like that. So this last paragraph, which got added in, really sort of strengthens it and says, okay, even though this now is the town manager and the finance department, this employee is part of that group, the selectmen haven't gone away. We can call the comptroller, we can talk to the comptroller can come here whenever he or she pleases, and we're going to be involved in the hiring, and we are definitely going to have safeguards that are cumbersome over the dismissal.
Whistleblower protection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you read the last two sentences about, I didn't pick up if it's can, may, shall, will.
Oh, no, it's may. Notwithstanding section, the comptroller shall be authorized to report directly to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen or any member of the board on any matter in the town at any time without the necessity of prior approval from any other town manager or official.
Okay.
So it just allows the comptroller to go straight to the board whenever they feel the need.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Martin, Ms. Rowe, you had a question? Yeah.
No, that's right.
Dean, this
We're
is
going to
John.
say the
I'll
same
fix
thing.
it. Okay, I'll fix that.
Well, you know what, if Chloris is, it might cut down my rent.
I just really appreciate that last paragraph. I have some long history that was very much helped out by Ruth Lewis and a bunch of other secret meetings that went on, and I won't go into the history, there's
You
no
bought me a
point.
nice coffee at Starbucks.
What?
You said you bought me a nice coffee at Starbucks when we talked about it.
Anyway, I believe everybody in this room knows what that history is, but I really like having the check and balances system, because in any business, I mean, I get it my business is audited every year by the state, and we have to always have checks and balances, and a big town like this needs to have the checks and balances, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Ms. Mahan, then Mr. Gurley. Yep.
Up until that last paragraph, I was adamantly opposed to this. So I thank the treasurer and others for listening to my rants. And just a point-blank question, and then just hopefully short remarks. I know that's all in there, and I'm thinking how this works day to day. Comptroller, he or she reports to the town manager. Selectmen can meet with him or her onto this. That person picks up the phone and says, Diane Mahan, because this is pretty much how it works in day-to-day life. If Selectman calls you, if you report, and I'm not saying this, I'm just saying if I was the town manager, you're gonna let me know that. So, comptroller calls and says, Diane Mahan's coming in, wants to talk to me about so-and-so. Town manager says, no, you can't discuss that with her. Does this wording here trump, oh, I hate to say that word.
Supersede.
Supersede that, like, can that
Yes.
scenario not happen? Or can that scenario, because I'm thinking when I first got on the board,
Yes.
I supposedly had all these rights, and I didn't. And
No, it actually strengthens that. And then if you want to take it to its logical conclusion, so let's say you wanted to meet with a comptroller about a matter, the town manager told the comptroller not to. You met anyway, you got the information you wanted, the town manager was so mad, he decided to fire the comptroller. The town manager and the comptroller are now at a meeting of the Board of Selectmen, a posted meeting, where I'm assuming the comptroller is going to say, I'm being fired for meeting with you. And I would think at that point, the board has two options at that point, right? The first is you can reject the termination because you know, but the person who's bringing the termination is also another person that reports to this board. And so one of the examples somebody gave at the question that came out at the Finance Committee meeting is, how does accountability work if the comptroller's in the Finance Department? And it's actually really simple. If the comptroller does something really bad, the deputy town manager needs to deal with it. And if the deputy town manager refuses to deal with it, the town manager needs to deal with the deputy town manager. And if the town manager decides not to deal with the deputy town manager, this board needs to deal with the town manager. And so accountability happens really quickly, the way this is structured. But at the same time allowing for what you said. You can go and talk to the comptroller for any reason.
okay. And that really gives me the cushion because, and it's not this town manager, he was not town manager at the time, but that situation that happened in 2011 with the schools and the then superintendent, 2011 wasn't the only year. That was like the 6th or 7th year. And it was the then town manager and then town officials and then superintendents and whomever that basically made sure those doors were shut on me. And the only way I got around it was getting other people in the field from other communities saying, you have a right to ask, this is how you get it. And the then comptroller, Ruth Lewis, that's how I was able to do that. So what I was thinking of is the pain in the butt Diane Mahan in the future, that's sitting in this chair, encounters the same set of circumstances that she or he still has, because believe me, for 7 years, those doors were slammed shut, and it was so frustrating. And then somebody told me, this is what you do, this is what you ask for, and the comptroller has to do it. So I didn't want to lose that safeguard, but it sounds like you more than preserved that, but also added a couple of extra levels of protection on all sides. So I'm okay with this now, but I'm still going to put my rant in there. Where the heck are the schools? I understand that, but we've been doing this since they're recognized in 2011, which was the 6th or 7th year of them doing that. And here we are in 2018, so thank you.
Mr. Gurley?
Yeah, so, Dean, thank you, excellent presentation. Did I understand correctly?
Adam put it together, by the way, in 2013. I'm just reminding you guys that.
Excellent plagiarism.
Yeah. Excellent plagiarism, that's good, yes, yes.
I have long admired Adam and Sandy, and my admiration for you grows each time you're in front of us. But, so, did I understand, so on removal, if it's placed on our agenda, I don't need to say it again, let me just answer the question. So it's placed on our agenda properly. Did I understand correctly, if we fail to act the person is automatically removed 15 days later. And on approval, same thing, if we're duly and it's on the agenda, and we fail to approve or take any of the related actions, that comptroller is automatically appointed 30 days later. I mean, I can't imagine us not acting, but I'm curious why that's in there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the purpose of this language is to make sure, as Mr. Carmen noted, that the board doesn't just sit on its hands and not remove or appoint somebody that the town manager has proposed. But act doesn't necessarily have to mean
Right, approval. There were three things that were in there, right?
So one of the things that we've tried to make clear here is that if the board decides that it needs more information and that time frame isn't sufficient, the
Right.
board can make a specific request to say,
Right.
we need more information before we're ready to make an action. So that the board doesn't feel like it has to, rush into something, but that would be the means by which the board would get more time.
Okay, I just don't understand why, I don't know, why we would do nothing. I just can't picture.
I don't,
Well, you
I don't
would
think
never-
there's a situation where you would, but the reason we put the 15 days in is because it's a personnel matter, because it would be posted on a public agenda. In fairness to the person who may or may not be discharged, you don't want something like this hanging over their head for 3, 6, 9 months. So if you had a situation where not this board, but a future board decided to hold the hearing and do nothing, so they didn't act either way, you don't have a really bad situation. You have a comptroller reporting to a deputy town manager, reporting to a town manager who's in limbo. And you don't want limbo to last for months. And so this says, though I think the board would act that day, the next day, or in a reasonable time, it just says over the long term that this can't hang out there for 6 months.
Just for the board, I'm not even sure that Mr. Carmen and I discussed this specifically, but we built in a little bit more of a generous time frame than other communities with similar provisions have. One, in recognition of this board's summer schedule, but two, in recognition that, the board's general schedule is to meet bi-weekly. With respect to something like removal, if there's a significant enough reason to remove somebody, we just want to make sure that we have a short time frame. Hopefully, we never have to worry about it, but especially if there's a removal, immediate removal for cause, and there's some sort of administrative suspension, we obviously want to be able to have the public part of the process happen as quickly as possible.
That was my next question you answered. Why is removal 15 and approval 30? If I may, Mr. Chairman, one more question. So, Adam, at one point when we discussed this, you educated me on how important it was for the comptroller to stay separate as keeper of the books. But that's not what this reorg is doing. Am I saying it right, or?
Yeah. May I? So I would answer that in two ways. I think in one way, my thinking has evolved some in seeing the need for the person serving in the comptroller's role to know there's a person who's also sitting in an office in town hall that's going to hold them accountable on a day-to-day basis. So I've seen that more clearly over the past several years, the need for that more direct connection for a person to feel accountable and need to be in the office and getting work done. But I'd also say, I think what Dean has proposed still achieves that independence in that there is a direct channel to the board should there be malfeasance or other trouble that needs to be reported to the board. So I think it maintains the independence where it needs to be maintained, and it institutes accountability on a day-to-day basis where I think there needs to be accountability instituted.
It did raise one more question, though.
Yeah.
You said in town hall, so removing comptroller out of the high school into town hall?
That's a good question. So when I said in town hall, I meant my seat, like someone sitting in town hall. But we're actively talking about it at the high school building committee right now, where comptroller is going to live, where IT is going to live, where facilities is going to live.
That's
And
what I thought it was.
I think there's a possibility we try to find a place for them in town hall, though. Yes.
Okay.
Good idea.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Very good idea.
Mr. Dunn.
So first of all, recommend of positive action on this change.
Second. Both of them?
Both changes, yes, thank you. Second, so Kevin, to your point about the 15 days, one of the downstream effects of that, which I think is just I agree with it all, just worth mentioning, is if this board is really divided on the issue, so if the town manager of the future says, let's fire the comptroller, and say one person is missing and we're locked at 2-2, the result, what this provision is it sets a default. And the default is the person gets fired. So we could change the language and we could reverse it. And we could say the default is the person is kept if we take no action. But I definitely agree with the sentiment that we have to put a default in here such that if the Board of Selectmen simply does nothing, there has to be something that follows on.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it too.
Yeah. And I definitely think,
To abstain.
yeah, a 2-2 abstain leads to a, but I think we can safely say that if we're at the town is ever at a place where the town manager wants to fire the comptroller and the selectmen are divided 2-2 on the issue, that is a dark day. I mean, there is something that has gone horribly wrong, and things like that. The ballot box is your only way to resolve stuff like that. Yeah. The other thing I want to say is that. I think this is very similar to what Diane was saying, is that with this change, it was really important to me that the selectmen retain the ability to maintain oversight of the town manager. And being able to talk directly to the comptroller is really important in that maintaining that oversight. And I think that this language satisfies that, and so that's why I'm really totally happy to support this.
So I'm very enthusiastic about the changes. I don't think I have to add much of anything to it. I think I really appreciate the thought that's gone into this with the whistleblower protections and with keeping open those lines of communication as well. I just want to point out one just small clerical thing that you probably want to fix after we take this vote, where it says said board or, said board of committee, yeah, okay. And so thank you very much for the presentation. Excellent presentation, discussion.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to distract your attention. I just wanted to add, and I'll allow Dean or Cindy to correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't think this completely satisfies what Ms. Bahan is looking for. I know it doesn't completely satisfy what you're looking for in terms of the school department, but I do believe that John Denizio, the new school CFO, has been attending some, if not all, of the finance department meetings. So he's, though it's not on the org chart, he is taking an active role in coordinating with the town. So I clearly understand that doesn't go as far as you want.
No, that's fine, and I would say just as vociferously that you are defending and giving, in my opinion, an excuse or some pacification to, they're doing nothing, but they're actually doing something. If you could flip it on the reverse, and now that we're moving forward on this, because I've been going kicking and screaming, because it started with the schools, supposed to be town school. I said, fine, I'll do town. I've been told for years and years, get the town thing and we'll make sure that the school follows. I have not seen that since 2011. You were not town manager then. So if you could do just what you just did there for the schools, for definitely myself as an individual selectman, when you're in their territory, in their genre. Because at some point, and I think, if any of my colleagues on the board agreed, I mean, we have to start holding their feet to the fire, because we're just about at the end of this road, and they're still saying, sorry, I'm not even traveling down the road that we created. So I know I'm a little miffy, because I kind of feel like I want to argue with somebody, so I'll call you tomorrow.
I just want to say, I'm not going to get in the school committee town debate, but there have been errors on the town side as well, and actually much more substantial ones. So that has been corrected by Mr. Dean Carmen, who's standing in front of us. But substantial money was lost and under the town side. So we all make mistakes. I think this structure is going to allow us to have a good check and balances system, and I'm looking forward to having it implemented. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Hyde.
One final comment. This is home rule legislation. Should the select board provision pass town meeting?
Yeah.
I just want to let the board know that I'll make it harmonious so that it won't say selectmen all over the place. It'll say select board. We will have a couple pieces of special legislation floating at once.
That question was hanging.
I'm so sorry, Doug.
No, it's good.
Into the 21st century.
No, I think it's good. We got it.
Anything? Oh, yes. Is anyone wishing to testify on this? No. Hearing none, okay. No, I think we're done with our debate. Okay, all those in favor of the motion by Mr. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Grilli, I think? Yeah. Okay. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Can I make one?
Was that on both, or?
Yeah.
That was on both.
Okay.
So just on an unrelated topic, I live over on the Lexington line on Killside Road, which is up the street from Trader Joe's and Walgreens. And like a lot of residents this weekend, it was raining and windy and horrible on Friday night. A tree fell down on my street, and thankfully it landed in people a few doors down who had gone away for the weekend, didn't hit their house or anything. And so over the course of the weekend, I got to watch the fire department show up once and in the rain and inspect someone's property and make sure that, their house wasn't going to catch on fire and secure it. And then I saw them leave, and then I saw them come back 10 minutes later when the power line then snapped off and rope off the street. And then I saw them come back again to check to make sure nothing awful happened. And then I watched the nice people chip the tree up. And then I watched the power company come put the power back on, which is very helpful when you're in the dark for long periods of time. And we got on with our day, which is a very nice way of saying that I don't know if you mentioned at the beginning of your meeting, but I am quite grateful for a whole bunch of people that spent all weekend making sure that my life would be appreciably better as soon as possible, as opposed to myself, who spent most of the weekend on my couch doing nothing and being, quite unproductive. So thank you to all the nice people in the town of Arlington who worked their tail off this weekend during that storm.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you,
Carmen. You made up for it in the productivity put into this, so thank you. We now move on to final votes and comments. Articles for review, that's Article 6, 11, 13, 14, 21. Mr. Heim.
If I may, I want to make two corrections preemptively because I think there are some folks who raised a few issues to me. One is that under Article 14, the bylaw amendment, tree preservation and protection, the comment should note that it's per inch DBH, not just DBH. That'd be weird.
DBH is fine, you don't have to say DBH inch.
Well, thank you, because
DBH inch is something completely different.
well, I
Right,
Okay.
right.
I trust Ms. Rowe in this.
thank you. Well, I will. I was told that needed to be corrected, but we'll sort it. Then it's all good to go.
Who do you want me to talk to?
The second issue is that
I think, Mr. Heim, I think the issue is in the, I don't have it in front of me, but in the comment, I believe it did not have DBH, in the comment, not in the recommended vote, but in the comment.
It's in the comment.
Does it say it?
This is the third paragraph of
Oh,
the comment.
goodness gracious.
Yep.
The tree committee informs town manager the actual cost of replacement trees is likely between $50 and $100, comma. Isn't that per DBH?
I'll put a per DBH in there.
Is that?
Well, that wouldn't be accurate either.
Isn't that just the fine? The DBH is a separate.
Yes, sir.
So, on the whole Article 14, I continue to think that we need to go to town meeting that's saying, and when this bylaw is passed, it is the selectmen's intent to set the rate at.
Correct.
And I guess there's two different ways of doing that. One is we could issue a separate piece of paper, but I just don't understand, I feel like, why not just put it in this article? So I would prefer to hold over this whole final I just want to pull this one out and not vote on this tonight, because I'm hoping that we're going to get a hearing in and we're going to have a discussion about what that rate should be.
I agree with you.
Okay, so it's a motion to table?
Motion to table 14.
14. Have a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Ms. Mahan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Good.
Sorry, we tabled it, so the discussion will. No, we just tabled it because, yeah. Sorry, Susan.
Yeah.
Sorry, Susan. Just need a little bit more work. If you could work it through with the town council, yeah, that'd be great.
While we're on for the topic, sorry.
Yeah.
So when are we going to do that?
Next meeting's the 26th, is that right?
19th?
19.
We can do it on the 19th.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, Doug, as far as I'm concerned, we can have like a draft comment that says, like, that we could
Right.
vote that night, that we're just gonna like write it in whatever number it is, but I want that to be a part of our
And I think we should
our
use
narrative.
Concord as an example.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And it did not fall off the radar.
Yeah,
So I did discuss it with the
Good.
manager.
So then can I make a motion to approve articles, final votes and comments on Article 8, 11, 13, 21?
Second.
6, 11,
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Carroll.
Yeah.
6, I'm sorry. 6,
I appreciate, on Article 6, I have to apologize for this. I think in part because we were moving quite quickly, we did not capture the full scope of what the capital planning committee manager and moderator intended to change. And so I just want to run through this extremely quickly. So just as before, they're proposing to add up to 2 additional seats. But as an additional sort of safeguard / flexibility mechanism, those 2 seats would only be triggered if the town manager and the chair of the Capital Finance Committee told the moderator, we need 1 or 2 more seats. And so that's been built into this vote to essentially reflect that we're only going to expand up to 6 moderator appointments if the manager and the Capital Planning Committee chair agree that we need 2 more seats. And further, and I appreciate Brian Rarig and John Leone and the manager for their specific attention to this, those additional seats, those sort of expansion seats, are for a 3-year term, and they're only reappointed if the manager and the chair of the Capital Planning Committee say we continue to need additional seats. Finally, the moderator and others have noted, and this was within the scope of the article, that all of the Capital Planning Committee members' terms expire at once, and so they just wanted to insert something in here that basically staggered them, so when the terms expire, it'll be for a 1-year term, 2-year term, 3-year term initially, so they won't all be getting reappointed in the same year.
You're saying, oh, 'cause that's exactly what he said at the last meeting that we had. You're saying that's not in here?
That is in here now.
It's in the new, it's this.
It's in the new
Oh,
recommended
yeah, no,
vote.
that's what I was looking
I'm
at.
apologizing because I failed to capture that, and it's now in here.
Oh, no, you didn't have to, that's all right, okay. So my motion can stay to approve Articles 6, 11, 13, and 21?
Yep, is there a second?
Yes,
Ms.
second.
Rowe. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. All opposed? It is unanimous. We now move on to correspondence received. Request to move no parking sign at corner of Warren and Beacon Street. Beth Badick, 1 Beacon Street. Is,
Move and refer to the manager.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion, a second. Yeah, manager, I think, sent us some correspondence on this.
So, yeah, I'll just note that I'm actively corresponding with this resident, and I think we plan on meeting on site to take a closer look at it with APD on Friday at a time not yet determined. And I think coming out of that meeting, we'll have more info for the board on whether or not we'll be asking the board to take any actions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay,
I think she may be here if she wants to comment.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Is she here?
Are you- is that-
Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up.
If-
Did you want to
If you
speak?
want to, I mean, you don't have to, but if you care to.
Yeah. You can pull that down if you want, yeah. If you could just identify yourself, yeah.
So my name is Beth Badick, I live at 1 Beacon Street.
Close.
Beth Badick, I live at 1 Beacon Street with my family. We moved in almost exactly 3 years ago. And this has been, I was very surprised when I came home one day and there was suddenly a no parking sign in front of my house. And I have one of these, thankfully other people left, want to say this dirty word, newer houses, that has a very steep driveway. So suddenly I'm in a house where you can't park in front of it and you can't park in the driveway. And as Adam alluded to, we've been in communication, and I just want to say that I don't know when you sleep, but I appreciate, Adam, how responsive you are. I also, this has been, I think, a good lesson for my family and my kids of just the civic process and having the recourse to talk to people. The 3 points that are really of concern are safety, and that's really one that Adam and I will look at it in person together on Friday. I think certainly the impact that it has on me, and I'll be honest that my husband even contacted a realtor today because we have so many people over and they all have kids and they're bringing stuff over to our house, so to not be able to park near us is such an inconvenience for our routine life that it really impacts our quality. But I think of more importance to this body that goes beyond just what Adam and I will talk about is the idea of communication. And just the fact that this was not communicated to us in any way, and let's say if safety is the main issue, and let's say there is a safety concern, there may have been other options. For example, there's a big tree on the corner of our property, and we're not the first homeowners there. We didn't do the landscaping. I think the tree, if anything, maybe might potentially obstruct a view. I'd be interested in talking about that, if that would solve a problem. I think that there's notification, I think, is a sign of respect to residents that own their own property when there's such an impact to their quality of life, and I see no reason why that couldn't have happened. And certainly there are possibly other options before something in concrete is there. And so I think that's just a theme that I'm seeing throughout my experience with the town, is just improving communication. So I'll leave it at that. I know it's getting late. I appreciate everybody's time, and I look forward to meeting with you on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion on the floor that has been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much. We now move on to new business. Ms. Kropelka. Mr. Heim.
One minor point of new business. The moderator has reported to me that the article with respect to changing the delivery of the town warrant, that he's suggesting that would go to a study committee because it's not ready for prime time, as Ms. Mahan has said sometimes. So I'll have that before you folks, and that'll be one less thing to have to worry about at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Heim. Mr. Chaplain.
Just one piece to echo Mr. Kerman's thank you to both the DPW crews and the private crews who are cleaning up downed limbs and trees Friday, Saturday, Sunday, continuing today. But also to just mention what was sent out in a town notice earlier today, that town staff will be going street by street starting tomorrow morning through Wednesday, hopefully getting across town to pick up branches, limbs, and other things that have fallen off of town trees onto the roadway. We've asked residents if they can move it so that it's not blocking the sidewalk or the street. We'll get to it, we'll chip it, and we'll pick it up. I do want to also make clear, though, we can't pick up yard waste. We don't have the ability to have a JRM pickup come in and pick up yard waste in bags, both from an operational point of view and also with the snow coming in, or the forecast snow coming in on Wednesday and Thursday. That would be very challenging to have yard waste on the street, have it snow, have plows hit it. It's more of a complication with that snow coming as well. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Chaplain. Mr. Greeley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on behalf of my family, to thank everybody. A week ago, we buried my mom, and she was married to a selectman for 21 years and had a son as a selectman for 30 years. She lived 70-something of her 96 years here in the town, but it was remarkable how all of you in this chamber reached out to us, and family and friends. It's amazing how many people are in Florida this time of year who texted, called, wrote, sorry, can't be there, we're in Florida. It's like, yeah, I'm not too jealous, but, and thank you for your kind words, sir, at the beginning of the meetings. Thank you.
Ms. Mahan.
Just one thing, ditto in terms of DPW and police and fire through this storm, previous storms, and upcoming storms, but I just wanted to report back because remember we had that tree hearing on Higgins Street, and we had that tree that looked like it was out of Amityville Horror that was right over that 5-year-old's bedroom.
Yeah.
About 3 days before this nor'easter storm came in, and I live one street over, so I don't want people to think, but I was thinking, oh my goodness, this big nor'easter, that poor little 5-year-old, I'm 55 and I'd be afraid to be up there because it was like the claw. DPW came down because they knew the storm was coming and cut it down to the root, because when I went over, they said, oh no, we wanted to get this down. We were told, before the storm came in, so everyone can rest assured. Right. And ironically enough, diagonally across the street on Higgins Road, to the left of this house, was a much healthier, what is it, silver maple? Norway, I don't know my trees. That just cracked in half, and that was one of the W crews and fire department that had to come out. It was like right on the corner of Higgins and Quincy, diagonally across from this house. So I just want to let you know, and again, thanks to everybody at DPW, because they're getting all ramped up for the last storm nor'easter, but somebody had the compassionate and also professionalism to get out there, because that thing would have come down, no problem. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Mahan. Mr. Dunn.
Just that the CDBG subcommittee met last week, and we started our work, and we've got another meeting coming forward. I think we're in really good shape to have our report back. For the first time in many years, we actually have a little bit more money to give this year. So I'd say this, out of the 5, so out of, if you think, like look back at least the last 5 years, 4 of them have been smaller, and this one's actually a little bit bigger, which makes it a little bit easier that way.
And the CBDG person is so smart. She creates beautiful spreadsheets.
If they're in color, Mr. Grilli can't recognize them.
No, it's not color.
He's colorblind.
But she was just great.
She was.
Yeah. Ms. Rowe?
No business.
Okay, I just have 2 things. First of all, last Thursday, Ms. Mahan and I and Ms. Chapdelaine were at the annual, and Ms. Kropelka were at the annual Police Department Awards night. And I know we want to congratulate Inspector Gina Bassett, who was awarded as the Officer of the Year, and many other officers were recognized. One striking thing I think a couple of us talked about is the life-saving awards, the number of lives that have been saved by our police department through the administration of Narcan and the uptick in the opioid crisis is just unbelievable. And just in that section of the awards night, it just popped out. Just how bad the crisis is and just how much our officers are called on to save lives. I think in one of the instances it was cited, there were 4 within, I think, the space of about half an hour or something like that. It was unbelievable. Congratulations and thank you to the Arlington Police Department, all of the officers and the non-sworn personnel as well, who were also recognized. And the last thing, I hope this will work. I want to, if you'll indulge me for 30 seconds, I want to see if I can get this to play through the mic. So we might have to be quiet.
And the Mass Cultural Council's Cultural Districts Initiative, supporting arts, culture, and economic vitality in communities across the Commonwealth. You can experience the Arlington Cultural District's vibrant Mass Ave corridor, connected by the Minuteman Bikeway, and featuring an eclectic mix of stores and restaurants, the Regent and Capitol Theaters, Robbins and Fox Libraries, Arlington Center for the Arts, the Cyrus E. Dallin Art Museum, and much more. Learn more about their Cultural Districts Initiative at massculturalcouncil.org.
That is an advertisement that'll be running on WBUR. That's one of the benefits of our cultural district designation, that we get that promotion that will be running on BUR to hopefully bring folks into the town. And I wanted to let the board know also that I've been invited by the Mass Cultural Council. They're having their first ever MCC Institute at the DCU Center in Worcester, and I've been invited to appear on a panel there along with the Consumer Affairs Director from Barnstable and the Mayor of Pittsfield to talk. The panel is called Breaking into City Hall. We'll be talking about how arts and culture organizations can partner with municipalities. I'm going to share a lot of our Arlington experience there. So I just wanted you to know that I will be out there kind of trying to wave the flag a bit for some of the success we've had here in Arlington. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Our next scheduled meeting of the Board of Selectmen will be March 19th. Good night, Arlington.